Your life starts in an egg, floating in a tank. You're not much to look at right now, just a cluster of developing tissue that will eventually become something extraordinary. Your species has been around for over 1,000 years, bred specifically for one feature that will define your entire existence. But you don't know that yet. Right now, you're just potential wrapped in a protective shell. After about a week, something shifts. The cramped space that's been your entire world suddenly feels too small. You push against the walls, testing the boundaries. Then instinct kicks in. You need to break free. You don't have teeth yet, but you have something better. A tiny egg tooth that's designed for exactly this moment. You scrape and push, wearing away at the shell until finally it gives way. Light floods in for the first time. It's overwhelming and terrifying, but there's no going back now. You wriggle through the opening, leaving behind the only home you've ever known. Welcome to the worlds. You're officially alive, and you're a bubble-eyed goldfish, though you don't look like much yet. You're transparent, barely visible against the gravel at the bottom of the tank. Your body is nothing more than a thin sliver with a massive yolk sac attached to your belly. That sac is your lifeline right now. It contains everything you need to survive your first few days. Proteins, fats, nutrients that will fuel your growth until you figure out how to find food on your own. But survival isn't guaranteed. The water around you is filled with dangers you can't even see. Bacteria, fungi, sudden temperature changes. Any of these could kill you before you've had a chance to really live. Some of your siblings don't make it past the first day. They drift to the bottom, their tiny bodies already beginning to decompose. You don't understand death yet, but you instinctively stay away from them. Your first challenge is learning to swim. Right now, you're more like a falling leaf than a fish. You drift with the current, unable to control your direction. The yolk sac makes you bottom heavy, so you spend most of your time resting on the substrate, occasionally fluttering your primitive fins in what could generously be called swimming. As days pass, something incredible happens. Your body starts to change. The yolk sac shrinks as your digestive system develops. Your fins grow stronger, more defined. Most importantly, your eyes begin to form, and they're not like other fish eyes. They're the beginning of something that will make you unique among all the creatures in the aquarium trade. By the time you're 2 weeks old, the yolk sac has almost disappeared. This is both exciting and terrifying because it means you need to find food on your own. Your mouth is tiny, barely visible, so you can't eat the same food that adult fish consume. Instead, you hunt for microscopic organisms, tiny creatures that drift through the water column like living dust. Your first successful hunt is purely accidental. A rotifer, a microscopic animal smaller than the period at the end of this sentence, bumps into your mouth. Your reflexes take over, and you gulp it down. The sensation is strange, but satisfying. You've just learned the most important lesson of your life. Food equals survival. But finding food isn't easy. You're competing with hundreds of your siblings, all searching for the same microscopic prey. Some are faster than you, some are more aggressive. You learn quickly that hesitation means hunger. When you spot something edible, you strike immediately. There's no time for politeness in the fish world. Your body continues to develop in ways that would seem impossible if you didn't experience it yourself. Around 3 weeks old, something extraordinary begins to happen around your eyes. The tissue starts to swell, forming small pouches that will eventually become your most distinctive feature. These aren't tumors or diseases. They're specialized fluid-filled sacs that your species has been bred to develop over centuries. At first, the pouches are barely noticeable, Just slight bulges that make your head look slightly larger than your siblings. But they grow steadily, day by day, week by week. They're delicate, more fragile than any other part of your body. Even a small bump could burst them, and if that happens, you might not survive. Other fish in the tank start to take notice of you and your developing siblings. To them, you're not fellow fish, you're potential food. Your transparent bodies and slow movements make you easy targets. You learn to hide among the plants and decorations, staying close to surfaces where the bigger fish can't easily spot you. Feeding becomes more complex as you grow. The microscopic food that sustained you as a fry is no longer enough. You need something bigger, more substantial. Your caretakers start providing newly hatched brine shrimp, tiny orange creatures that move through the water in jerky, erratic patterns. They're fast, but you're getting faster too. Your first successful brine shrimp hunt is a milestone. You spot one drifting nearby, its movements hypnotic and unpredictable. You position yourself carefully, judging the distance and timing. Then you strike, your mouth opening wider than seems possible for such a small fish. The brine shrimp disappears in a single gulp, and you feel a surge of satisfaction that's purely instinctual. By 6 weeks old, you're starting to look like a proper fish. Your fins are fully developed, your body has taken on the classic goldfish shape, and those distinctive eye pouches are becoming more pronounced. They're still small compared to what they'll eventually become, but they're already affecting how you see the world. The pouches don't improve your vision, quite the opposite, actually. They partially obstruct your field of view, creating blind spots that make navigation more challenging. You bump into things more often than your non-bubble-eye siblings. You miss food that's right in front of you because the pouches block your line of sight. It's frustrating, but you adapt because you have no choice. Swimming becomes an art form that requires constant adjustment. The pouches create drag, slowing you down and affecting your balance. You can't make the quick, darting movements that other goldfish use to escape danger or catch food. Instead, you develop a more graceful, deliberate swimming style. You flow through the water rather than cutting through it. Your relationship with your siblings changes as you all grow. The transparent fry stage is over. You've developed proper scales and coloration. Some of your brothers and sisters show the classic orange gold of traditional goldfish. Others display white, black, or mixed patterns. You're developing your own unique coloration, a combination of genes expressing themselves for the first time. But it's the eye pouches that really set you apart. Not all of your siblings develop them to the same degree. Some have barely noticeable swelling, while others, like you, show the dramatic balloon-like sacs that define the breed. These differences will determine your future. The fish with the most pronounced bubbles are considered the most valuable, the most desirable. Competition for food intensifies as you and your siblings grow larger. The tank that seemed enormous when you were a tiny fry now feels crowded. Fish jostle for position during feeding time, and the stronger, more aggressive ones get the best food. You learn to be strategic, waiting for the chaos to die down before making your move. Your poor vision means you can't compete in the feeding frenzy, but you can clean up the scraps that others miss. At 2 months old, you face your first major crisis. One morning, you wake up feeling different. Your usually clear vision is cloudier than normal, and one of your eye pouches feels strange, heavier somehow. Throughout the day, the sensation worsens. By evening, you realize what's happening. Your pouch is infected. The infection spreads quickly. The clear fluid inside the pouch becomes cloudy, then yellowish. The pouch swells even larger than normal, throwing off your balance completely. Swimming becomes nearly impossible. You spend most of your time resting on the bottom, struggling to breathe as the infection saps your energy. This is a critical moment in your development. Many bubble-eye goldfish don't survive their first serious eye pouch infection. The delicate tissue is prone to bacterial and fungal problems, especially in crowded conditions. Your caretakers notice the problem and begin treatment, adding medications to the water that tastes strange and make you feel sluggish. For days, you hover between recovery and decline. The infection fights against the treatment, and your body fights against the infection. You barely eat, and when you do manage to catch some food, you often feel too weak to keep it down. Some of your siblings watch you with what might be concern, but fish don't really understand illness the way humans do. To them, you're just another competitor who's temporarily out of the running. Then, slowly, the tide turns, the medication begins to work, the cloudy fluid in your pouch starts to clear, and the swelling reduces slightly. Your energy returns gradually, and with it, your appetite. It takes nearly a week, but eventually, you're swimming normally again, or as normally as a bubble-eye goldfish ever swims. The experience changes you in subtle ways. You're more cautious now, more aware of the fragility of your most distinctive features. You avoid rough surfaces and sharp objects that could damage your pouches. You're more careful during feeding time, taking your time rather than rushing toward food that might put you at risk. By 3 months old, you've reached what humans call the juvenile stage. You're recognizably a bubble-eye goldfish now, complete with the characteristic features that define your breed. Your pouches are substantial, but not yet fully developed. They'll continue growing throughout your life. Your coloration has stabilized into a beautiful pattern that's uniquely yours. The tank hierarchy has become established by this point. The largest, most aggressive fish dominate the prime feeding spots and the best hiding places. You've found your niche somewhere in the middle, not powerful enough to challenge the dominant fish, but capable enough to hold your own against the smaller, weaker ones. Your daily routine has settled into a predictable pattern. You spend your mornings exploring the tank, searching for any food that might have been missed during the previous day's feeding. The afternoon brings the main feeding time, when your caretakers drop pellets and live food into the water. You've learned to position yourself strategically, away from the main crowd but close enough to dart in when opportunities arise. Evenings are for rest and digestion. You find a comfortable spot among the plants or decorations and settle in for the night. Your bubble eyes make you vulnerable while sleeping. You can't close your eyes like mammals do, and the pouches obstruct your vision enough that predators could approach unnoticed. But in the safety of the tank, with no natural predators, you can afford to relax. The water around you is a carefully controlled environment. Temperature, pH, oxygen levels, all monitored and adjusted to keep you healthy. You don't understand the complexity of the system that keeps you alive, but you respond to its rhythms. When the temperature drops slightly, you become less active, conserving energy. When it rises, your metabolism speeds up and you become more alert. Your growth continues steadily. Each week brings noticeable changes. You're longer, deeper, more substantial. Your fins develop their full adult proportions, and your swimming becomes more confident despite the ongoing challenge of your eye pouches. You're learning to compensate for your visual limitations, using your other senses more effectively. The lateral line system along your sides helps you detect movement and pressure changes in the water. When another fish swims nearby, you feel the displacement through the sensory network. It's not as precise as vision, but it helps you navigate your environment and avoid collisions. Your sense of smell develops too, becoming crucial for finding food and identifying other fish. Each of your tank mates has a distinct scent signature, and you learn to recognize them even when you can't see them clearly. This chemical communication system operates constantly in the background of your daily life. At 4 months old, you experience your first real growth spurt. Your appetite increases dramatically, and you seem to grow visibly from week to week. Your eye pouches expand proportionally, becoming more prominent and more delicate. This is both exciting and concerning. The larger they get, the more distinctive you become, but also the more vulnerable. Life as a bubble-eyed goldfish is just beginning to reveal its complexities, and the challenges ahead will test every adaptation you've developed so far. Your eye pouches have grown large enough now that they affect everything you do. Swimming requires constant recalculation as the fluid-filled sacs bounce and sway with each movement. What once felt natural now demands concentration. You can't simply dart toward food anymore. You have to plan your approach, accounting for the momentum of your bubble eyes and the way they'll shift when you change direction. The other fish in the tank have learned to recognize you as different. Some seem curious about your unusual appearance, swimming closer to investigate the strange, bulbous growths around your eyes. Others keep their distance, perhaps sensing that you're not quite like them. You're neither threatening nor particularly useful to them, so you exist in a sort of neutral zone within the tank's social structure. Your feeding technique has evolved out of necessity. While your siblings can spot food from across the tank and race toward it, you rely on patience and positioning. You've learned to hover near the bottom after feeding time, waiting for pellets to drift down within your limited field of vision. It's not glamorous, but it works. You catch what others miss, scavenging the overlooked scraps that settle into corners and crevices. The medication treatments become a regular part of life. Your eye pouches are prone to bacterial infections, especially when the water quality fluctuates or when you accidentally bump into something sharp. Your caretakers have learned to watch you closely for signs of cloudiness or swelling. At the first indication of trouble, the treatments begin, strange-tasting chemicals that make the water feel different against your gills. Each infection is a battle for survival. Your immune system isn't particularly strong, and the delicate tissue of your eye pouches provides an easy entry point for pathogens. You've survived several bouts now, each one teaching you to be more careful, more aware of potential hazards. Sharp edges on decorations, rough surfaces on rocks, even aggressive movements from other fish. All of these become calculated risks. By 5 months old, your personality has fully emerged. You're cautious, but not fearful, methodical, but not slow. You've developed your own routines and preferences within the confines of the tank. There's a particular plant where you like to rest, its broad leaves providing cover and support for your delicate eye pouches. You've claimed it as your own territory, gently nudging away any fish that try to take your spot. Your relationship with your caretakers just becomes more complex as you grow. They recognize you now, picking you out from among your siblings during tank maintenance and feeding. You've learned their schedules, anticipating when they'll approach the tank. Unlike some fish that hide when humans appear, you've grown comfortable with their presence. They represent safety and food, two things that matter deeply in your limited world. The seasonal changes outside the tank affect you in subtle ways. Even though your environment is climate controlled, there are variations in light cycles and atmospheric pressure that your body responds to. During what would be winter months, you become slightly less active, conserving energy even though your temperature remains constant. In spring and summer, Your appetite increases, and your colors seem more vibrant. Your eye pouches continue growing throughout this period, reaching impressive proportions. They're now large enough that they occasionally touch the substrate when you rest on the bottom, creating an odd tripod effect with your tail. Swimming requires even more care, as the increased size creates more drag and makes you more top-heavy. You've adapted by staying closer to the bottom most of the time, using the tank floor as a reference point for navigation. The hierarchy in the tank shifts as all of you mature. Some of your siblings have grown larger and more dominant, claiming the best feeding spots and prime real estate. Others remain smaller and more submissive, content to take whatever scraps are available. You fall somewhere in the middle, neither aggressive enough to challenge the alphas, nor weak enough to be completely pushed around. Food variety increases as you grow larger. Your caretakers introduce new items to your diet: bloodworms, daphnia, specialized pellets designed for fancy goldfish. Each new food presents challenges and opportunities. Bloodworms are delicious, but difficult to catch with your limited vision. Daphnia are easier to spot, but quick to escape. You learn the hunting techniques for each prey type, developing a repertoire of feeding strategies. Your first serious injury happens during a particularly chaotic feeding time. Another fish, excited by the arrival of bloodworms, crashes into you while making an aggressive feeding run. The impact tears a small hole in one of your eye pouches, and clear fluid begins leaking out. The sensation is alarming, not exactly painful, but definitely wrong. You retreat to your favorite hiding spot while the damaged pouch slowly deflates. Recovery from a ruptured eye pouch is a delicate process. The torn tissue must heal while maintaining the pouch's ability to hold fluid. Your caretakers increase the frequency of water changes and add additional medications to prevent infection. For weeks, your appearance is lopsided as one pouch remains deflated while the other continues to grow. Gradually, the damaged pouch begins to fill again, though it never quite matches the size of its undamaged partner. The experience teaches you valuable lessons about vulnerability and adaptation. You become even more cautious around other fish, especially during feeding time. You learn to read the body language of your tank mates, identifying which ones are likely to make sudden, aggressive movements. Your survival depends on avoiding conflicts you can't win and situations you can't escape from quickly. At 6 months old, you've reached what could be called adolescence in goldfish terms. Your body has developed most of its adult characteristics, though you'll continue growing slowly for years to come. Your eye pouches are now your most prominent feature, defining how you look, how you move, and how others perceive you. They're both your greatest asset and your greatest vulnerability. The tank feels smaller now that all of you have grown. What once seemed like a vast ocean now feels crowded, especially during feeding time. Competition for resources has intensified, and every fish has developed strategies for getting their share. You've perfected your scavenging technique, but you're always looking for new opportunities to improve your position in the tank's ecosystem. Your vision, such as it is, has stabilized at a level that could charitably be called limited. The eye pouches block significant portions of your visual field, and their constant movement makes focusing difficult. You've learned to rely heavily on your other senses: smell, the lateral line system, even taste, to navigate your environment. You're not blind, but you might as well be compared to fish with normal eyes. Sleep becomes more challenging as your eye pouches grow larger. Finding a comfortable position requires careful arrangement of your body to avoid putting pressure on the delicate sacs. You've learned to wedge yourself between plants or decorations in ways that provide support without causing damage. Your sleeping spots become increasingly important to your daily routine. The water chemistry of your tank requires constant attention from your caretakers. Your species is particularly sensitive to ammonia and nitrite levels, and your fancy breeding makes you even more delicate than standard goldfish. Poor water quality can quickly lead to fin rot, bacterial infections, or worse. You don't understand the invisible chemistry that surrounds you, but you feel its effects in your gills, on your skin, and in your overall health. Your feeding schedule becomes more structured as you mature. Rather than the frequent small meals of your fry stage, you now receive larger portions less often. Your digestive system has developed the capacity to handle substantial meals, though you must be careful not to overeat. Goldfish don't have stomachs in the traditional sense, so food processing happens throughout your digestive tract. Overeating can lead to serious health problems that your fragile constitution might not survive. The relationship dynamics in your tank continue evolving. Some fish pair off into loose partnerships, swimming together and sharing feeding territories. Others remain solitary, aggressively defending their personal space. You find yourself somewhere in between, not antisocial, but not particularly social either. Your eye pouches make close interaction risky, so you maintain friendly but distant relationships with your tank mates. By 7 months old, you've survived longer than many bubble-eyed goldfish manage. The combination of genetic fragility, environmental challenges, and physical vulnerability means that your species has a higher mortality rate than hardier goldfish varieties. Each day you survive is an achievement, each successful feeding a small victory against the odds stacked against you. Your caretakers have become skilled at managing your specific needs. They've learned to recognize the early signs of eye pouch infections, to adjust feeding techniques to accommodate your visual limitations, and to modify the tank environment to reduce hazards. You've become something of a project for them, requiring more attention and care than the average goldfish. The routine of tank maintenance affects you more than it does your hardier siblings. Water changes create currents that can knock you around, and the temporary disruption of your carefully memorized environment leaves you disoriented. You've learned to find shelter during these times, waiting out the chaos until your world returns to normal. Your appetite has stabilized into predictable patterns. You know the difference between feeding time and maintenance time, between the approach of familiar caretakers and strangers. Your limited intelligence has adapted to the narrow confines of your existence, developing just enough awareness to navigate the challenges of tank life while remaining blissfully unaware of the larger world beyond the glass walls. The mirror effect of the tank walls sometimes confuses you. Your reflection appears as another fish, one that moves in perfect synchronization with your own movements. Sometimes you approach the glass, curious about this mysterious companion that never quite makes contact. The interaction is brief and puzzling, but it adds a small element of mystery to your otherwise predictable environment. Your coloration has fully developed by this point, settling into the pattern that will define your appearance for the rest of your life. The interplay of genetics and environment has created a unique combination of hues and markings that distinguish you from every other fish in the tank. You're not just another bubble-eyed goldfish, you're an individual with your own distinctive appearance and personality. The seasonal rhythms continue to affect you in ways that surprise even your caretakers. As the months cycle through their patterns, your behavior shifts subtly. During the equivalent of breeding season, even though reproduction isn't possible in your controlled environment, you become restless. You swim more actively, explore areas of the tank you normally ignore, and show increased interest in your tank mates. It's an ancient instinct that has no outlet in your artificial world, but it drives you nonetheless. Your eye pouches have reached a size that would be considered impressive by breed standards. They're so large now that they occasionally brush against each other when you turn your head, creating a soft collision that you've learned to anticipate and accommodate. The fluid inside sloshes gently with each movement, adding an extra layer of complexity to every action you take. Simple tasks like picking food off the substrate require careful positioning to avoid having your own eye pouches block your view of what you're trying to eat. The weight of your enlarged eyes affects your buoyancy in ways that become more pronounced as you age. You find yourself naturally sinking toward the bottom of the tank, requiring more effort to maintain neutral buoyancy in the water column. Your swim bladder works overtime to compensate, but physics is physics. You've adapted by spending more time near the substrate, turning this limitation into an advantage by becoming an expert at finding food that settles in the lower reaches of your environment. Your tank mates have fully adjusted to your presence by now. The initial curiosity about your unusual appearance has faded into acceptance. You're part of the established order, neither predator nor prey, neither leader nor outcast. You occupy your own ecological niche within the microcosm of the tank, the careful scavenger who cleans up what others miss, the cautious navigator who avoids confrontation. Feeding time has evolved into a complex dance of positioning and timing. You've mapped out the tank's current patterns, learning where food tends to drift and settle. While other fish chase after sinking pellets in a frenzy of competition, you position yourself in the quiet eddies and dead zones where overlooked morsels eventually accumulate. It's not glamorous hunting, but it's effective. You rarely go hungry, even if you rarely get the choicest pieces. Your health management has become a sophisticated routine. Your caretakers have learned to read the subtle signs that indicate when your eye pouches are becoming stressed or infected. A slight change in the clarity of the fluid, a minor alteration in your swimming pattern, even small behavioral changes can signal the need for preventive treatment. You've become accustomed to the taste of various medications, each with its own distinct flavor that you've learned to associate with the healing process. The tank's social dynamics shift periodically as individual fish assert dominance or lose status. You watch these power struggles from the sidelines, neither threatened by them nor interested in participating. Your survival strategy relies on staying below the radar of the more aggressive fish while maintaining enough presence to avoid being completely ignored during feeding time. It's a delicate balance that requires constant attention to the subtle social cues that govern tank life. Your memory has developed in ways that compensate for your visual limitations. You've memorized the location of every decoration, every plant, every potential hazard in your environment. You know the texture of different surfaces under your fins, the way currents flow around obstacles, the acoustic properties of various hiding spots. Your world is mapped not just visually, but through a complex integration of all your available senses. The lighting cycle of your tank creates its own rhythm in your daily life. When the lights come on each morning, you gradually become more active, emerging from your nighttime resting spot to begin the day's foraging. As evening approaches and the lights dim, you settle into a slower pace, eventually finding your preferred sleeping position wedged securely among the plants. Your body has adapted to this artificial day-night cycle, producing hormones and adjusting metabolism accordingly. Temperature fluctuations, even minor ones, affect you more dramatically than they would a hardier fish. Your delicate constitution means that even a degree or two of variation can impact your appetite, energy level, and immune function. Your caretakers have learned to maintain strict temperature control, but you can still sense the subtle changes that occur when equipment cycles on and off or when room temperature varies. Your digestive system has adapted to the regular feeding schedule, producing enzymes and digestive juices in anticipation of meal times. You can sense when feeding time approaches, not just through external cues, but through internal biological rhythms that have synchronized with the artificial schedule imposed by your caretakers. Your stomach, or rather the beginning of your digestive tract, actually starts preparing for food before it arrives. The water quality in your tank requires constant vigilance from your human caretakers. Your sensitivity to ammonia, nitrites, and pH fluctuations means that what might be minor water quality issues for hardier fish can become life-threatening problems for you. You don't understand the chemistry, but you feel its effects immediately. Poor water quality makes your gills burn, affects your appetite, and can quickly lead to secondary infections in your vulnerable eye pouches. Your growth rate has slowed significantly from the rapid development of your juvenile months, but you're still changing. Your eye pouches continue expanding gradually, and your body deepens and fills out. The proportions that seemed awkward when you were smaller are beginning to look more natural as your body catches up to the size of your distinctive features. You're approaching your adult size, though you'll continue growing slowly throughout your life. The hierarchy in your tank has stabilized into a predictable pattern. The largest, most aggressive fish control the prime feeding territories and the best hiding spots. Below them, a middle tier of moderately assertive fish compete for secondary positions. At the bottom, the smallest and most timid fish make do with whatever scraps and spaces remain available. You exist somewhat outside this hierarchy, your unique needs and limitations creating a separate category that doesn't quite fit the normal social structure. Your caretakers have developed specialized techniques for your care. They use feeding tools that place food directly in front of you, compensating for your visual limitations. They've arranged the tank decorations to create protected pathways that allow you to navigate safely without risking damage to your eye pouches. Even the water flow has been adjusted to create gentle currents that won't knock you around or disorient you. The reflection of your eye pouches in the tank glass sometimes creates optical illusions that confuse your already limited vision. Light refracting through the curved surfaces of your pouches can create false images or distort your perception of distance and direction. You've learned to rely more heavily on your non-visual senses when navigating near the glass walls, using your lateral line system and chemical sensors to confirm what your eyes might be misinterpreting. Your sleep patterns have adapted to the unique challenges posed by your anatomy. Finding a position that doesn't put pressure on your eye pouches while still allowing you to rest comfortably requires careful positioning. You've developed a preference for sleeping wedged between soft plants or in corners where you can brace yourself without risking injury to your most vulnerable features. The seasonal breeding behaviors of your tank mates affect the entire social environment, even though actual reproduction isn't possible in your controlled habitat. During these periods, aggression levels increase, territorial disputes become more common, and the normal feeding patterns get disrupted. You've learned to be extra cautious during these times, staying closer to your safe zones and avoiding areas where conflicts are likely to occur. Your immune system remains your weakest link. The genetic modifications that created your distinctive appearance also compromised your natural disease resistance. Every minor scratch, every small environmental change, Every slight stress can potentially trigger an infection or illness that your body struggles to fight off. Your caretakers have become expert at preventive care, adjusting conditions and treatments to keep you healthy rather than waiting for problems to develop. The artificial nature of your environment means that many natural behaviors have no outlet. You'll never experience the seasonal migrations that wild goldfish might undertake, never feel the varying temperatures and water conditions of natural waterways, never encounter the diverse array of foods that would be available in a natural habitat. Your world is safe but limited, predictable but constraining. Your relationship with your caretakers has evolved into something approaching recognition. You've learned to distinguish between the different humans who care for you, recognizing their individual approaches to feeding, cleaning, and maintenance. Some move slowly and deliberately, accommodating your limited vision and mobility. Others are more rushed, requiring you to retreat to safety until their work is complete. The chemical composition of your tank water is monitored and adjusted constantly, but even with the best care, minor fluctuations occur. Your sensitive system detects these changes immediately, responding with subtle alterations in behavior, appetite, and activity level. You're essentially a living water quality indicator, your health reflecting the precise balance of elements that sustain your artificial ecosystem. Your feeding response has become highly refined over the months. You can distinguish between different types of food, not just by sight, but by the subtle vibrations they create when they hit the water, the way they sink, even the chemical traces they release. This sensory sophistication helps compensate for your visual limitations, allowing you to locate and identify food sources that might otherwise be missed. The constant maintenance required for your eye pouches has become second nature. You've learned to position yourself carefully when resting, to avoid sharp objects and rough surfaces, to navigate crowded areas during feeding time without risking collision damage. These behaviors are now automatic, performed without conscious thought as part of your basic survival repertoire. Your world continues to revolve around the simple necessities of survival, finding food, avoiding danger, maintaining health. But within these constraints, you've developed a complex understanding of your environment and your place within it. Each day brings the same challenges and the same small victories, a routine that will define the remainder of your existence in this carefully controlled aquatic world. At 8 months old, you've developed what could generously be called a routine, though calling it thrilling would be a stretch. Your days blend into each other with the predictability of a metronome. Wake up, forage for missed food, wait for feeding time, navigate carefully around your tank mates, avoid anything that might puncture your increasingly massive eye pouches, then settle in for another night of awkward positioning to keep those delicate sacs from getting damaged while you sleep. Your eye pouches have reached truly impressive proportions now. They're so large that they've started to dictate every aspect of your existence. Swimming isn't just difficult, it's become an exercise in physics that would challenge an engineer. The fluid inside sloshes with every movement, creating momentum that carries you further than you intend to go. Stopping requires planning ahead, like a cargo ship trying to dock. Quick movements are completely out of the question. The weight distribution of your head has shifted dramatically. Your brain, which was never particularly large to begin with, now sits behind 2 massive fluid-filled balloons that make up the majority of your head's mass. It's like trying to balance while carrying 2 water balloons strapped to your face. Every turn of your head requires compensating for the momentum of all that sloshing liquid. Your tank mates have learned to work around you rather than with you. During feeding time, they've figured out that you're not competition for the prime pieces of food that require speed and agility to catch. You get the leftovers, the pieces that drift down slowly enough for you to intercept. It's not ideal, but it works. You've become the cleanup crew, the fish equivalent of someone who arrives at a buffet just as they're putting the warming trays away. Navigation has become an art form that requires constant recalculation. The tank decorations that once seemed reasonably spaced now feel like an obstacle course designed specifically to torment fish with poor vision and massive, fragile appendages hanging off their heads. You've memorized safe pathways through the tank, routes that minimize the risk of collision while still allowing access to food and shelter. Your caretakers have noticed that you're spending more time near the bottom of the tank. It's not laziness or illness, it's practical engineering. The closer you stay to the substrate, the less distance you have to fall if your buoyancy control fails. Your swim bladder works overtime, trying to compensate for the weight of your eye pouches, but sometimes physics wins. Better to stay low and avoid the embarrassment of sinking like a stone in front of your tank mates. The social dynamics of the tank have evolved to accommodate your limitations. You're no longer seen as a potential competitor or threat by the other fish. You're more like a piece of living decoration that occasionally moves around and eats food. The dominant fish ignore you completely, which is actually preferable to being seen as competition. The smaller, more timid fish sometimes cluster near you, perhaps sensing that you're not aggressive and pose no threat to their own survival. Your vision has deteriorated to the point where you're essentially navigating by memory and other senses. The eye pouches block so much of your visual field that you might as well be wearing blinders. You've learned to recognize the approach of other fish more by the pressure waves they create than by seeing them coming. Your lateral line system has become hypersensitive, detecting even minor disturbances in the water that might indicate movement nearby. Feeding time requires strategic positioning that would make a chess master proud. You can't compete in the initial feeding frenzy, so you've learned to position yourself in areas where food is likely to settle after the chaos dies down. You know which decorations create dead spots in the current, where pellets tend to get trapped, and how to access these areas without getting caught in the crossfire of more aggressive feeders. Your health maintenance has become a full-time job for your caretakers. They check your eye pouches daily for signs of infection, cloudiness, or damage. The slightest change in appearance or behavior triggers immediate intervention. You've become accustomed to the routine of water testing, medication administration, and environmental adjustments. Your delicate constitution means that what might be minor issues for hardier fish become major health crises for you. The temperature sensitivity that came with your fancy breeding has become more pronounced as you've aged. Even slight fluctuations in water temperature affect your appetite, energy levels, and immune function. Your caretakers maintain the tank temperature within a narrow range, but you can still detect minor variations that occur when equipment cycles or room conditions change. Your body responds to these subtle shifts with corresponding changes in behavior and activity. Your digestive system has adapted to the reality of your feeding limitations. Since you can't compete for the choicest food items, your gut has become efficient at extracting maximum nutrition from whatever you manage to consume. You've learned to eat slowly and thoroughly, making sure to get every possible nutrient from each morsel. Waste not, want not, especially when you're not sure when the next good feeding opportunity will arise. Sleep has become increasingly complicated as your eye pouches have grown. Finding a position that doesn't put pressure on these delicate structures while still allowing you to rest requires careful engineering of your body position. You've developed a preference for sleeping wedged into corners or against soft plants that can support your eye pouches without risking damage. Your sleeping spots have become more important to you than prime feeding locations. The reflection patterns created by your enlarged eye pouches sometimes create visual effects that are more confusing than helpful. Light refracting through the curved, fluid-filled surfaces can create distorted images or false reflections that make navigation even more challenging. You've learned to rely primarily on non-visual cues when these optical illusions become too disorienting. Your memory has become your most valuable asset. Since your vision is essentially useless for navigation, you've memorized every detail of your environment, the location of decorations, the texture of surfaces, the flow patterns of the filtration system, even the subtle acoustic properties of different areas in the tank. Your world is mapped not through sight, but through a complex integration of touch and smell, hearing, and pressure sensitivity. The breeding behaviors that affect your tank mates during certain seasons have minimal impact on you. Your energy is so focused on basic survival that you have little left over for reproductive instincts. Besides, your physical limitations would make any attempt at courtship behavior impossible. You're essentially removed from the normal social and reproductive dynamics that govern the lives of healthier fish. Your caretakers have developed specialized feeding techniques specifically for you. They use feeding sticks to place food directly in front of your mouth, compensating for your inability to hunt effectively. They've learned to feed you separately from the other fish, ensuring that you get adequate nutrition without having to compete for resources you can't possibly win. It's like having a personal chef, albeit one who serves fish flakes instead of gourmet cuisine. The water quality requirements for your tank have become increasingly stringent as your sensitivity has grown. What might be acceptable water conditions for hardier goldfish varieties can quickly become life-threatening for you. Your caretakers test the water daily, adjusting chemical levels and filtration to maintain the precise conditions your delicate constitution requires. You've become the limiting factor that determines the entire tank's care regimen. Your immune system remains your greatest vulnerability. Every minor environmental change, every slight stress, every small physical contact carries the potential for infection or injury. Your genetic modifications that created your distinctive appearance also compromised your natural disease resistance. You're essentially living on borrowed time, dependent entirely on the skill and dedication of your caretakers to prevent the health crises that your body can't handle on its own. The artificial nature of your environment has eliminated many of the natural behaviors and experiences that wild goldfish might enjoy, but it's also removed most of the natural threats that would have killed you long ago. You'll never experience the seasonal migrations, temperature variations, or diverse food sources of a natural habitat, but you'll also never face predators, food scarcity, or the harsh environmental conditions that your ancestors endured. Your relationship with your caretakers has evolved into something that might be called mutual dependence. They've invested considerable time, effort, and resources into keeping you alive, and you've become a living testament to their skill at maintaining extremely delicate aquatic life. You recognize their individual approaches to care, responding differently to each person based on their handling techniques and feeding methods. The daily routine of tank maintenance affects you more dramatically than it does your hardier tank mates. Water changes create currents that can knock you around, and the temporary disruption of your carefully memorized environment leaves you disoriented until conditions return to normal. You've learned to find shelter during these times, waiting in protected areas until the chaos subsides and your world stabilizes again. Your feeding response has become highly specialized over the months. You can identify different food types, not just by appearance, but by the way they move through the water, the chemical signatures they release, and the vibrations they create when they contact the surface. This sensory sophistication helps compensate for your visual limitations, though it still doesn't make you competitive with fish that can actually see their food clearly. The constant vigilance required to protect your eye pouches has become so automatic that you perform these behaviors without conscious thought. Avoiding sharp objects, navigating around rough surfaces, positioning yourself carefully during rest periods, all of these survival strategies have become as natural as breathing. Your entire behavioral repertoire has evolved around the single imperative of keeping those massive, delicate sacs intact. Your world has shrunk to the immediate area around your body. While other fish might be aware of activities happening across the tank, your attention is necessarily focused on your immediate surroundings. You've become intensely local in your awareness, hypervigilant about conditions in your immediate vicinity, while remaining largely oblivious to events happening even a few feet away. The physics of your existence have created limitations that extend beyond simple mobility. The drag created by your eye pouches means that even gentle currents can push you around, making it difficult to maintain position in areas with significant water flow. You've learned to use tank decorations as windbreaks, positioning yourself in the lee of obstacles to avoid being swept away by the circulation system. Your appetite has remained surprisingly robust despite all your other limitations. Perhaps because eating is one of the few activities you can still perform reasonably well, you approach feeding time with enthusiasm that borders on desperation. Each meal represents not just nutrition, but one of the few positive experiences available in your constrained existence. The seasonal rhythms that affect your tank mates still influence you, though in subtle ways. During what would be breeding season in natural environments, you become slightly more restless, exploring areas of the tank you normally avoid. It's an ancient instinct that has no practical outlet in your controlled environment, but it drives you nonetheless, adding a touch of unpredictability to your otherwise routine existence. Your caretakers have learned to read the subtle signs that indicate changes in your health status. A slight alteration in your swimming pattern, a minor change in your feeding response, even small behavioral modifications can signal the need for immediate intervention. You've become a high-maintenance pet that requires constant monitoring and frequent adjustments to environmental conditions. The mirror effect created by the tank walls continues to confuse your already limited vision. Your reflection appears as another fish, one that perfectly mimics your movements but never quite makes contact. Sometimes you approach the glass, curious about this mysterious companion that seems to understand your struggles. The interaction is brief and ultimately meaningless, but it adds a small element of interest to your otherwise predictable daily routine. Your coloration has stabilized into its adult pattern, though the constant stress of survival has prevented the vibrant hues that healthier specimens might display. You're more focused on staying alive than on looking attractive. Your energy goes toward basic survival rather than the luxury of bright, healthy-looking scales and fins. At 9 months old, You've beaten the odds simply by surviving this long. Many bubble-eyed goldfish don't make it past their first few months, succumbing to infections, injuries, or the simple stress of trying to survive with such extreme physical modifications. Each day you continue to exist is a small victory against the biological deck that's been stacked against you from birth. Your existence has become a careful balance between the minimal activity required to stay alive and the maximum caution needed to avoid injury. You move when you must, rest when you can, eat when food is available, and try to avoid anything that might threaten the delicate structures that define your appearance and limit your capabilities. The tank that once seemed like an endless ocean now feels like a carefully controlled medical facility designed to keep one extremely fragile patient alive. Every aspect of your environment has been modified to accommodate your specific needs and limitations. You're not just a pet, you're a living testament to the extent humans will go to maintain creatures that probably shouldn't exist in the first place. Your survival depends entirely on the continued dedication of caretakers who understand your unique requirements and the constant vigilance needed to prevent the health crises that your compromised genetics make inevitable. You're a beautiful disaster, an ornamental fish that exists purely for aesthetic purposes while requiring more care and attention than most pets could ever demand. The routine continues, day after day, with minor variations, but no fundamental changes. You eat, you rest, you carefully navigate your limited world, and you try to avoid the countless hazards that could end your precarious existence at any moment. It's not much of a life by any normal standard, but it's your life, and you'll continue living it for as long as your delicate constitution and your caretaker's skills can keep you going. Your world becomes increasingly small as your first year comes to an end. The tank that once felt vast now seems barely adequate for your bulbous frame. Every movement requires calculation. Every feeding opportunity demands strategic positioning. You've mastered the art of existing in slow motion, moving through your environment with the deliberate care of someone carrying fragile cargo, which in a sense, you are. The eye pouches have reached proportions that would be comical if they weren't so limiting. They're now larger than your actual head. Two massive, fluid-filled balloons that dictate every aspect of your daily existence. When you turn to look at something, the momentum of the sloshing liquid carries your head further than intended, requiring a counter movement to regain balance. It's like trying to steer a boat with an anchor dragging behind each ear. Your caretakers have become increasingly creative in their attempts to accommodate your needs. They've rearranged the tank layout multiple times, creating protected pathways and eliminating potential hazards. Sharp edges have been covered, rough surfaces smoothed, and the water flow adjusted to create gentle currents that won't overwhelm your limited mobility. The tank has essentially been redesigned around your disabilities. Sleep becomes an engineering problem that requires nightly solutions. Your eye pouches are now so large that lying on your side risks rupturing them against the substrate. Sleeping upright leaves you vulnerable to toppling over. You've learned to wedge yourself into corners where the tank walls can support your head while keeping the delicate sacs suspended safely in the water. It's not comfortable, but comfort is a luxury you can no longer afford. The social dynamics of the tank have evolved to completely exclude you. You're not ignored, you're simply irrelevant. The other fish go about their daily activities of establishing territories, competing for food, and engaging in social interactions as if you don't exist. You've become background scenery, a living decoration that occasionally moves but poses no threat and offers no benefits to anyone else. Your feeding technique has devolved into something that resembles begging more than hunting. You position yourself near the feeding area and wait for your caretakers to notice your presence. They've learned to hand feed you using specialized tools, placing food directly in front of your mouth since you can no longer locate it reliably on your own. It's undignified, but dignity is another luxury that disappeared along with your mobility. The infections become more frequent as your immune system struggles under the constant stress of maintaining those oversized eye pouches. Every few weeks brings a new crisis: cloudy fluid, swollen tissue, or bacterial growth that threatens to destroy the very features that define your existence. Your caretakers have become expert at diagnosing and treating these recurring problems, but each episode leaves you weaker and more vulnerable than before. Your vision has deteriorated beyond what could reasonably be called functional. The massive pouches block most of your visual field, and what little you can see is distorted by the curved surfaces and refracting light. You navigate primarily through memory and the faint pressure waves you detect through your lateral line system. The world has become a place of shadows and vibrations rather than clear images. Temperature fluctuations that other fish barely notice send your system into crisis. Your modified genetics have left you with virtually no tolerance for environmental changes, a degree of temperature variation that would be imperceptible to a normal goldfish can trigger a cascade of health problems that take weeks to resolve. Your caretakers monitor the tank conditions obsessively, making constant adjustments to maintain the narrow parameters your survival requires. The breeding seasons that affect your tank mates pass without your participation or awareness. Your energy is so focused on basic survival that reproductive instincts never develop. Besides, your physical limitations would make any courtship behavior impossible, even if the desire existed. You've been effectively removed from the natural cycles that govern fish behavior, existing in a biological limbo where survival trumps all other considerations. Your digestive system has adapted to extract maximum nutrition from minimal food intake. Since competitive feeding is impossible, you've learned to make the most of whatever scraps you can obtain. Your metabolism has slowed to conserve energy, and your body has become efficient at storing nutrients during the good times to sustain you through periods when food is scarce or difficult to obtain. The daily routine of tank maintenance becomes increasingly disruptive to your fragile equilibrium. Water changes create currents that can knock you around like debris in a storm. The temporary removal of decorations eliminates the landmarks you use for navigation. Even the vibrations from cleaning equipment can disorient you for hours afterward. You've learned to find shelter and wait out these disturbances, emerging only when your world returns to its carefully controlled, normal state. Your caretakers have developed an almost medical approach to your care. They maintain detailed records of your health status, tracking every symptom and treatment response. Your tank has become more like a hospital room than a home, with equipment for monitoring water quality, dispensing medications, and providing specialized care. You're not just a pet, you're a patient requiring round-the-clock medical management. The reflection of your eye pouches in the tank glass creates optical effects that are more confusing than ever. The massive, fluid-filled sacs act like funhouse mirrors, creating distorted images that bear no resemblance to reality. You've given up trying to interpret these visual signals, relying instead on your other senses to understand your environment. The glass walls that once showed you the world beyond now only reflect back a distorted version of your own limitations. Your memory has become your most valuable survival tool. You've memorized every safe pathway through the tank, every potential feeding location, every hiding spot that can accommodate your oversized frame. Your world exists as much in your mind as in the physical space around you, a detailed mental map that compensates for your inability to see clearly or move quickly. The seasonal changes that once provided subtle variety to your routine now pass unnoticed. Your focus has narrowed to the immediate challenges of each day, finding food, avoiding injury, managing the constant health crises that threaten your survival. The larger rhythms of the natural world have become irrelevant to an existence that revolves entirely around medical maintenance and careful positioning. Your relationship with your caretakers has evolved into something approaching total dependence. You recognize their individual approaches to feeding, cleaning, and medical care, responding with the limited behavioral repertoire available to you. They've become your lifeline, the only thing standing between you and the inevitable consequences of your genetic modifications. The water chemistry of your tank requires constant monitoring and adjustment. Your sensitivity to ammonia, nitricase, and pH changes means that conditions must be maintained within extremely narrow parameters. Your caretakers test the water multiple times daily, making frequent adjustments to keep the chemistry within the range your compromised system can tolerate. You've become the limiting factor that determines the entire tank's management protocol. Your appetite remains one of the few aspects of your biology that functions normally. Perhaps because eating is one of the few activities you can still perform, you approach feeding time with enthusiasm that borders on desperation. Each meal represents not just nutrition, but one of the few positive experiences available in your increasingly constrained existence. The physics of your movement have created a feedback loop of increasing limitation. As your eye pouches grow larger, swimming becomes more difficult, which reduces your activity level, which weakens your muscles, which makes swimming even harder. You're trapped in a cycle of declining physical capability that feeds on itself with each passing month. Your immune system remains your weakest link, compromised by the genetic modifications that created your distinctive appearance. Every environmental stress, every minor injury, every slight change in routine carries the potential to trigger a health crisis that your body struggles to overcome. You're essentially immunocompromised, dependent on a sterile environment and constant medical intervention to survive. The artificial nature of your existence has eliminated most of the natural behaviors that define fish life. You don't migrate, explore, hunt, or engage in social interactions. Your world has been reduced to the basic biological functions of eating, breathing, and trying to avoid injury. Its survival stripped down to its most fundamental elements. Your caretakers have learned to read the subtle signs that indicate changes in your condition. A slight alteration in your positioning, a minor change in your breathing pattern, even small variations in your response to feeding can signal the need for immediate intervention. You've become a high-maintenance organism that requires constant observation and frequent medical adjustments. The tank decorations have been selected and arranged with your limitations in mind. Every surface has been evaluated for potential hazards, every pathway tested for accessibility. The aesthetic considerations that normally guide aquarium design have been subordinated to the practical requirements of keeping you alive and mobile within your constraints. Your coloration has dulled from the constant stress of survival. The vibrant hues that might characterize a healthy specimen have faded to muted tones that reflect the energy your body diverts from appearance to basic survival functions. You look like what you are, a creature struggling to maintain life under conditions that challenge every biological system. The mirror effects created by your eye pouches, sometimes produce moments of confusion that border on the surreal. Light refracting through the curved, fluid-filled surfaces creates images that have no basis in reality. You've learned to ignore these visual artifacts, but they serve as constant reminders of how far your perception has diverged from normal fish experience. Your world has become intensely local, focused on the immediate area around your body. While other fish might be aware of activities happening across the tank, your attention is necessarily concentrated on your immediate surroundings. You've developed hypervigilance about conditions in your personal space, while remaining largely oblivious to events happening even a short distance away. The constant vigilance required to protect your eye pouches has become so automatic that you perform protective behaviors without conscious thought. Avoiding obstacles, positioning yourself carefully, moving slowly and deliberately, all of these survival strategies have become as natural as breathing. Your entire behavioral repertoire has evolved around the single imperative of keeping those massive, delicate structures intact. Your existence has become a testament to both the ingenuity of human care and the questionable ethics of extreme selective breeding. You're kept alive through technological intervention and dedicated care that would be impossible in any natural setting. You're simultaneously a marvel of aquaculture and a cautionary tale about the consequences of prioritizing appearance over biological function. At 10 months old, you've survived longer than many fish of your breed, but each day brings new challenges that test the limits of both your resilience and your caretaker's skills. Your life has become a carefully orchestrated medical intervention, a daily battle against the biological consequences of genetic modifications that prioritized aesthetic appeal over survival capability. The routine continues with minor variations, but no fundamental improvements. You eat when fed, rest when possible, navigate carefully through your limited world, and submit to the medical interventions that keep you alive. It's not much of a life by any normal standard, but it represents a remarkable achievement in keeping alive a creature that nature never intended to survive. Your caretakers have invested enormous resources in maintaining your existence, turning your tank into a specialized medical facility equipped for managing extreme aquatic disabilities. Every aspect of your environment has been modified to accommodate your unique requirements, from water chemistry to physical layout to feeding protocols. The other fish in your tank go about their normal activities while you exist on the periphery of their world. They've learned to navigate around you rather than with you, treating you as a living obstacle that occasionally needs to be avoided during feeding time or territorial disputes. You're present, but not participating, existing in the same space, but living in a completely different reality. Your survival depends entirely on the continued dedication of caretakers who understand that your existence requires constant vigilance and frequent intervention. You're not just a pet, you're a full-time responsibility that demands specialized knowledge, expensive equipment, and unwavering commitment to maintaining conditions that allow such an unlikely creature to continue living. The artificial nature of your environment has created a bubble of safety that protects you from the natural world that would have eliminated you long ago. You'll never experience the challenges and opportunities of a natural habitat, but you also won't face the predators and environmental pressures that your ancestors evolved to handle. You exist in a carefully controlled pocket of reality designed specifically to sustain life forms that shouldn't exist in the first place. Your legacy, if you have one, will be as an example of how far humans will go to maintain creatures that exist purely for aesthetic purposes. You're a living piece of art that requires more resources and attention than most human endeavors, kept alive through dedication that borders on obsession with preserving something beautiful but ultimately impractical. The days blend together in endless repetition of the same careful routines. Wake up, position carefully, wait for feeding, submit to health monitoring, rest in protected areas, avoid anything that might threaten your delicate structures. It's a life reduced to its most basic elements, survival stripped of everything except the essential functions needed to maintain biological processes. Your world continues to shrink as your limitations become more pronounced. What began as minor inconveniences have evolved into major disabilities that define every aspect of your existence. You're trapped in a body that was designed for appearance rather than function, maintained by artificial means in an environment that exists solely to keep you alive, despite your biological impossibilities. The tank that once felt like an ocean now resembles more of a medical facility than a home. Every surface has been evaluated for potential hazards, every decoration positioned with your safety in mind. Your caretakers have essentially redesigned the entire environment around your disabilities, creating pathways wide enough for your bulbous frame and eliminating anything that might pose a threat to those massive, delicate sacs hanging from your head. Your feeding routine has devolved into something that would be embarrassing if you had the capacity for embarrassment. You can no longer hunt, chase, or even reliably locate food on your own. Instead, you've learned to position yourself near the feeding area and wait, not like a predator stalking prey, but like a patient waiting for medical assistance. Your caretakers have developed specialized feeding techniques, using long tweezers and feeding sticks to place food directly in front of your mouth. It's undignified, but dignity became irrelevant the moment survival became your only priority. The infections come more frequently now. Every few weeks, one or both of your eye pouches develops the telltale cloudiness that signals bacterial invasion. Your immune system, already compromised by your genetic modifications, struggles to fight off these recurring attacks. Each infection leaves you weaker, more vulnerable, less capable of handling the next crisis. Your caretakers have become expert diagnosticians, recognizing the early warning signs and beginning treatment before the situation becomes critical. Temperature sensitivity has reached the point where even minor fluctuations can trigger cascading health problems. What other fish experience as barely noticeable changes in their environment hit you like hammer blows. Your modified genetics have stripped away virtually all tolerance for environmental variation. A single degree of temperature change can disrupt your already fragile equilibrium for days. Your caretakers monitor conditions obsessively, making constant micro-adjustments to maintain the narrow parameters your survival requires. Your vision has deteriorated beyond what could charitably be called functional. The eye pouches now block the majority of your visual field, and what little you can see is distorted beyond recognition by the curved, fluid-filled surfaces. Light refracts through your pouches in ways that create false images, phantom movements, optical illusions that bear no resemblance to reality. You've essentially given up trying to see, relying instead on memory, vibration, and the faint chemical signals that drift through the water. Navigation has become an exercise in faith and muscle memory. You've memorized every safe pathway through the tank, every potential obstacle, every hiding spot that can accommodate your oversized frame. Your world exists as much in your mind as in the physical space around you, a detailed mental map that compensates for your inability to perceive your surroundings clearly. When decorations are moved during cleaning, you become completely disoriented, bumping into walls and objects until you can rebuild your mental picture of the environment. Sleep presents engineering challenges that would stump a physicist. Your eye pouches are now so massive that finding a position that doesn't risk rupturing them against the substrate requires careful planning. Lying on your side could burst the delicate membranes. Resting upright leaves you vulnerable to toppling over. You've learned to wedge yourself into corners where the tank walls can support your head while keeping those fragile sacs suspended safely in the water. It's not restful, but rest has become a secondary concern to basic structural integrity. The social dynamics of the tank have evolved to completely exclude you from normal fish interactions. You're not ostracized, you're simply irrelevant to the daily activities that occupy your tank mates. They establish territories, compete for resources, engage in social hierarchies, and form relationships as if you don't exist. You've become living scenery, a mobile decoration that occasionally needs to be navigated around, but poses no threat and offers no benefits to anyone else. Your digestive system has adapted to extract maximum nutrition from whatever scraps you manage to obtain. Since competitive feeding is impossible, your body has learned to make the most of every morsel. Your metabolism has slowed to conserve energy, and your gut has become remarkably efficient at processing even poor quality food sources. It's a biological response to scarcity, even though scarcity in your case is imposed by disability rather than environmental conditions. The breeding behaviors that affect your tank mates during certain seasons pass without your awareness or participation. Your energy is so completely focused on basic survival that reproductive instincts never develop. Besides, your physical limitations would make any courtship behavior impossible, even if the desire existed. You've been effectively neutered by your disabilities, removed from the biological cycles that drive normal fish behavior. Your caretakers have developed medical protocols that rival those used for critically ill patients. They maintain detailed health records, tracking every symptom, every treatment response, every subtle change in your condition. Your tank has been equipped with monitoring devices that would be at home in an intensive care unit. You're not just a pet requiring care, you're a patient demanding round-the-clock medical management. The water chemistry requirements have become increasingly stringent as your sensitivity grows. Ammonia levels that would be barely detectable to normal fish can trigger serious health crises in your compromised system. Nitrite spikes that other fish weather without difficulty can push you into organ failure. Your caretakers test the water multiple times daily, making constant adjustments to maintain the pristine conditions your survival demands. You've become the limiting factor that determines the entire tank's management protocol. Daily maintenance routines that other fish barely notice have become major disruptions to your fragile equilibrium. Water changes create currents that toss you around like debris in a storm. The vibrations from cleaning equipment can disorient you for hours. Even the temporary removal of familiar decorations eliminates the landmarks you depend on for navigation. You've learned to find shelter during these disturbances, emerging only when your carefully controlled world returns to its normal state. Your appetite remains surprisingly robust, despite all your other declining functions. Perhaps because eating represents one of the few activities you can still perform with some degree of success, you approach feeding time with enthusiasm that borders on desperation. Each meal represents not just nutrition, but one of the few positive experiences available in your increasingly constrained existence. Food has become both sustenance and entertainment in a life stripped of almost everything else. The mirror effects created by your eye pouches have evolved into something approaching surreal art. Light refracting through the massive curved surfaces creates impossible images, phantom fish that appear and disappear, distorted reflections that bear no resemblance to reality, optical illusions that would be beautiful if they weren't so disorienting. You've learned to ignore these visual artifacts, but they serve as constant reminders of how far your perception has diverged from normal fish experience. Your memory has become your most valuable survival tool, more important than vision, hearing, or even smell. You've cataloged every detail of your environment, the texture of surfaces, the flow patterns of the filtration system, the acoustic properties of different hiding spots. Your world is mapped through touch, pressure, and careful observation accumulated over months of patient exploration. When your environment changes, even slightly, you must painstakingly rebuild this mental database. The seasonal rhythms that once provided subtle variety to your routine have become irrelevant to an existence focused entirely on immediate survival. Spring brings no urge to explore, summer no increase in activity, fall no preparation for change, winter no period of rest. Your biological clock has been reset to medical time, cycles of treatment and recovery, crisis and stabilization, rather than the natural rhythms that govern normal fish life. Your relationship with your caretakers has evolved into something resembling the bond between a terminally ill patient and dedicated medical staff. You recognize their individual approaches to feeding, handling, and treatment. Some move with the slow deliberation that accommodates your limitations. Others work more quickly, requiring you to retreat to safety until their tasks are complete. They've become your lifeline, the only barrier between you and the inevitable consequences of your genetic modifications. The physics of your existence have created a feedback loop of declining capability. As your eye pouches grow larger, movement becomes more difficult, which reduces your activity level, which weakens your muscles, which makes movement even harder. You're trapped in a spiral of increasing disability that feeds on itself with each passing month. What began as minor inconveniences have evolved into major impairments that define every aspect of your daily life. Your immune system represents your greatest vulnerability, compromised by the same genetic modifications that created your distinctive appearance. Every environmental stress, every minor injury, every slight deviation from routine carries the potential to trigger health crises that your body struggles to overcome. You're essentially living with acquired immunodeficiency, dependent on a sterile environment and constant medical intervention to survive challenges that normal fish handle without difficulty. The artificial nature of your existence has eliminated most of the behaviors that define fish life in natural settings. You don't explore new territories, hunt for varied prey, engage in seasonal migrations, or participate in social interactions. Your world has contracted to the basic biological functions of breathing, eating, and trying to avoid injury. Its life reduced to its most fundamental elements, survival stripped of everything except essential maintenance. Tank decorations are selected and positioned based entirely on your safety requirements rather than aesthetic considerations. Every surface is evaluated for potential hazards, every pathway tested for accessibility with your oversized frame. Sharp edges are eliminated, rough textures smoothed, and water flow adjusted to prevent currents that might overwhelm your limited mobility. The visual appeal that normally guides aquarium design has been subordinated to the practical requirements of keeping you alive. Your coloration has faded from the constant stress of survival. The vibrant hues that might characterize a healthy specimen have dulled to muted tones that reflect the energy your body diverts from appearance to basic biological functions. You look exactly like what you are, a creature struggling to maintain life under conditions that challenge every system in your body. Beauty has become a luxury you can no longer afford. The constant vigilance required to protect your eye pouches has become so automatic that you perform protective behaviors without conscious thought, moving slowly, avoiding obstacles, positioning yourself carefully during rest periods. All of these survival strategies have become as natural as breathing. Your entire behavioral repertoire has evolved around the single imperative of keeping those massive, delicate structures intact. Your world has become intensely local, focused on the immediate space around your body. While other fish remain aware of activities happening across the tank, your attention is necessarily concentrated on your immediate surroundings. You've developed hypervigilance about conditions in your personal space, while remaining largely oblivious to events occurring even a short distance away. Your sphere of awareness has contracted to match your physical limitations. The breeding seasons that trigger complex behaviors in your tank mates pass unnoticed in your simplified existence. Your energy reserves are so completely devoted to basic survival that reproductive instincts never develop. Your body has essentially decided that passing on genes is less important than maintaining the minimal functions needed to stay alive from day to day. Reproduction requires surplus energy, and you have no surplus of anything. At 11 months old, you've achieved something remarkable simply by continuing to exist. Most bubble-eye goldfish don't survive their first year, succumbing to infections, injuries, or the accumulated stress of trying to function with such extreme physical modifications. Each day you continue breathing represents a small victory against biological odds that were stacked against you from the moment of conception. Your caretakers have invested enormous resources in maintaining your existence, transforming your tank into a specialized medical facility equipped for managing severe aquatic disabilities. The cost of keeping you alive probably exceeds that of maintaining several normal fish, but they've committed to seeing this through to whatever conclusion awaits. You've become both a testament to their dedication and a cautionary tale about the consequences of extreme selective breeding. The routine continues with minor variations, but no fundamental improvements. You position yourself carefully, wait for hand feeding, submit to daily health monitoring, rest in protected areas, and try to avoid the countless hazards that could end your precarious existence at any moment. It's not much of a life by normal standards, but it represents a remarkable achievement in maintaining a creature that nature never intended to produce. Your survival depends entirely on the continued commitment of caretakers who understand that your existence requires constant vigilance and frequent medical intervention. You're not just a pet requiring basic care. You're a full-time responsibility that demands specialized knowledge, expensive equipment, and unwavering dedication to maintaining conditions that allow such an unlikely organism to persist. The other fish in your tank continue their normal activities while you exist on the periphery of their world. They've learned to accommodate your presence without integrating you into their social structure. You share the same physical space, but inhabit completely different realities. They live in a world of competition, exploration, and interaction. You exist in a world of medical management and careful positioning. Your legacy, if such a term applies to ornamental fish, will be as an example of how far humans will go to maintain creatures that exist purely for aesthetic purposes. You're a living work of art that requires more resources and attention than most human endeavors, kept alive through dedication that borders on obsession with preserving something beautiful but ultimately impractical. The days continue to blend together in endless repetition of the same careful routines. Wake up cautiously, position yourself strategically, wait for feeding assistance, submit to health monitoring, rest in protected locations, avoid anything that might threaten your delicate structures. Life has been reduced to its most basic elements, survival stripped of everything except the essential functions needed to maintain biological processes for one more day. Your existence has become a carefully orchestrated medical intervention, a daily battle against the biological consequences of genetic modifications that prioritized appearance over function. Every breath you take is made possible by human intervention, every meal delivered through artificial means, every health crisis managed through medications and environmental controls that wouldn't exist in any natural setting. The tank walls that once showed you glimpses of the world beyond now serve mainly as supports for your increasingly cumbersome frame. The glass reflects back distorted images created by your eye pouches, phantom shapes that bear no resemblance to reality. You've stopped trying to interpret these visual signals, accepting that your perception of the world has diverged so far from normal experience that conventional sight has become more hindrance than help. Your memory continues to serve as your primary navigation tool, a detailed mental map of safe pathways and potential hazards accumulated through months of careful exploration. When your environment changes during maintenance, you must painstakingly rebuild this cognitive blueprint, feeling your way through altered landscapes with the patience of someone who understands that haste could prove fatal. The seasonal changes that once provided subtle variations to your routine now pass unnoticed. Your focus has narrowed to the immediate challenges of each day, managing health crises, avoiding injury, extracting nutrition from whatever food sources become available. The larger rhythms of the natural world have become irrelevant to an existence that revolves entirely around medical maintenance and survival. Your relationship with your caretakers has deepened into something approaching mutual dependence. They've invested too much time and resources to abandon you now, while you've become completely dependent on their specialized knowledge and dedicated care. It's a partnership born of necessity rather than affection, sustained by commitment to seeing through what has become a long-term medical project. The water chemistry of your tank requires constant adjustment to maintain the narrow parameters your compromised system can tolerate. Your sensitivity to environmental changes means that conditions must be monitored and corrected continuously. You've become the limiting factor that determines every aspect of tank management, from filtration to feeding schedules to maintenance protocols. Your appetite remains one of the few aspects of your biology that functions normally, though even feeding has become a complex medical procedure requiring specialized equipment and techniques. Each meal represents both necessary nutrition and one of the few positive experiences available in your increasingly constrained world. Food has become medicine, entertainment, and reward, all rolled into one essential activity. The physics of movement continue to present challenges that compound with each passing month. Your eye pouches have reached proportions that make swimming more of a controlled fall than actual locomotion. Every change in direction requires planning ahead. Every stop demands preparation for the momentum that will carry you further than intended. You've learned to think several moves ahead, like a chess player anticipating consequences. Your immune system remains critically compromised, leaving you vulnerable to infections that normal fish would shake off without difficulty. Every environmental stress becomes a potential health crisis, every minor injury a gateway for opportunistic pathogens. Your body's ability to defend itself has been sacrificed to maintain the genetic modifications that created your distinctive appearance. The artificial nature of your existence has created a protective bubble that shields you from natural selection while simultaneously making you completely dependent on technological intervention. You exist in a carefully controlled environment designed specifically to sustain life forms that couldn't survive anywhere else. It's both sanctuary and prison, protection and limitation. Your caretakers have learned to read the subtle signs that indicate changes in your condition, slight alterations in positioning, minor variations in breathing patterns, small changes in feeding response. You've become a complex diagnostic puzzle that requires constant observation and frequent adjustments to environmental and medical protocols. The constant struggle to maintain basic biological functions has consumed all your energy reserves, leaving nothing for the activities that normally define fish behavior. You don't explore, play, or engage in social interactions. Your existence has been pared down to the absolute minimum required to sustain life, with every available resource devoted to the simple act of continuing to breathe. The mirror effects as created by your eye pouches continue to evolve as the structures grow larger and more prominent. Light refracting through the massive, fluid-filled sacs creates increasingly complex optical illusions that bear no relationship to your actual surroundings. You've learned to navigate by touch and memory, rather than trying to interpret the surreal images that pass for vision in your distorted world. Your world has contracted to the immediate vicinity of your body, with awareness focused on the space you can actually influence or control. The activities of other fish, the changes in lighting, the rhythms of filtration equipment, all of these have become background noise to an existence centered on the immediate challenges of positioning, breathing, and maintaining the integrity of your most vulnerable features. At 1 year old, you represent both an achievement and an anomaly. You've survived longer than statistics suggest you should have, defying the biological odds through a combination of dedicated care and sheer stubborn persistence. Every day you continue to exist pushes the boundaries of what's possible for a creature so extensively modified that basic survival becomes a medical miracle. Your legacy will be measured not in offspring or territorial conquests, but in the precedent you've set for maintaining life under impossible conditions. You've become a case study in the limits of artificial intervention, a living example of how far technology and dedication can extend existence beyond what nature intended or biology supports. The routine that has sustained you for months continues with minor variations, but no fundamental changes. Each day brings the same careful positioning, the same assisted feeding, the same health monitoring, the same protective behaviors that have become as automatic as breathing. It's a life reduced to its most essential elements, but it remains life nonetheless. Your survival has required the transformation of your entire environment into a specialized care facility, with every aspect of tank management focused on your unique needs and limitations. The cost in time, resources, and attention has been enormous, but your caretakers have committed to maintaining you for as long as your compromised biology allows. The other fish in your tank have completely adapted to your presence, treating you as a permanent fixture rather than a fellow inhabitant. They navigate around you, compete for resources without considering you a threat, and go about their daily activities as if you exist in a parallel dimension that occasionally intersects with theirs. Your existence continues to challenge conventional understanding of what constitutes viable life. You persist in a state that hovers between survival and medical intervention, maintained by artificial means in an environment designed specifically to compensate for your biological impossibilities. Each breath represents a victory over genetics, each day a testament to the power of dedicated care. The journey that began with your hatching in darkness has led to this carefully controlled existence, where every aspect of your environment has been modified to accommodate your unique requirements. You've become both the beneficiary and the victim of human desire to create beauty without regard for biological function, living proof that aesthetic goals and survival imperatives don't always align. Your caretakers have noticed subtle changes in your behavior as you approach the middle of your second year. The enthusiasm you once showed for feeding time has diminished slightly, not because you're less hungry, but because the physical act of eating has become more taxing. Your jaw muscles, weakened by months of careful, deliberate movements, struggle with food that requires any significant chewing. Even the softest pellets demand effort that leaves you exhausted. The eye pouches have reached what your caretakers hope is their maximum size, though there's no guarantee they won't continue expanding. They're now so massive that they create their own microenvironments within the tank. The fluid inside moves independently of your head movements, creating a delayed reaction effect that makes every motion feel disconnected from your intentions. When you try to turn left, the momentum of the sloshing liquid carries you further than planned, requiring a counter adjustment that often overshoots in the opposite direction. Your sleep patterns have become increasingly irregular. The engineering problem of positioning your body safely has no perfect solution, only a series of uncomfortable compromises. Some nights, you manage to wedge yourself securely between decorations, achieving something resembling rest. Other nights, you spend hours adjusting and readjusting your position, never quite finding a configuration that doesn't put dangerous pressure on your most vulnerable features. The infections have evolved too, becoming more resistant to the standard treatments that once cleared them up quickly. Your caretakers have had to escalate to stronger medications, each new treatment bringing its own side effects that challenge your already compromised system. Recovery periods grow longer, and the clear intervals between infections become shorter. Your body is losing the war against pathogens that see your eye pouches as perfect breeding grounds. Temperature regulation has become even more critical as your sensitivity increases. The automated heating system that once maintained adequate stability now requires manual fine-tuning throughout the day. Your caretakers check the thermometer obsessively, making micro adjustments that would seem paranoid if they weren't absolutely necessary. A half-degree variation that might go unnoticed by normal fish can trigger cascading health problems that take weeks to resolve. Your digestive efficiency has actually improved as your activity level declined. With less energy spent on movement, your body has learned to extract maximum nutrition from minimal food intake. Your metabolism has slowed to match your sedentary lifestyle, creating a biological equilibrium that sustains life while demanding very little fuel. It's an adaptation that would be impressive if it weren't born of such severe limitation. The social dynamics of your tank have solidified into patterns that completely exclude you from normal fish interactions. Your tank mates have established territories, formed loose alliances, and developed feeding hierarchies as if you don't exist. You've become part of the landscape, rather than part of the community, a living obstacle that occasionally needs to be navigated around, but poses no threat and offers no benefit to anyone else. Navigation through your memorized pathways has become increasingly unreliable as your eye pouches interfere with your spatial awareness. The mental map you've carefully constructed over months of exploration becomes less accurate when the physical landmarks you depend on are obscured by your own anatomy. You find yourself bumping into familiar objects, misjudging distances you've traveled hundreds of times before. Your caretakers have started discussing contingency plans for various scenarios that might arise. They've researched surgical options for repairing ruptured eye pouches, investigated emergency treatment protocols for serious infections, and even consulted with veterinary specialists who have experience with exotic fish conditions. Your care has evolved from routine pet maintenance to complex medical management that requires specialized knowledge and equipment. The water quality standards for your tank have become more stringent than those maintained in many research facilities. Every parameter is monitored continuously, with backup systems in place to prevent the kinds of fluctuations that could prove fatal to your compromised system. Your caretakers test the water multiple times daily, adjusting chemistry and filtration to maintain conditions that exist nowhere in nature but are essential for your survival. Daily maintenance routines now require careful choreography to minimize disruption to your fragile equilibrium. Water changes are performed slowly, with temperature matching and chemical balancing that takes hours to complete properly. Equipment cleaning happens in stages to avoid removing too many familiar landmarks at once. Even routine tasks, like feeding other fish in the tank, require planning to ensure you're not accidentally disturbed or injured. Your appetite fluctuates unpredictably now, influenced by factors your caretakers are still learning to recognize. Some days you show enthusiasm for food that approaches your earlier eagerness. Other days you show little interest even in preferred items, picking at offerings with the reluctance of someone who eats from obligation rather than hunger. These variations worry your caretakers, who've learned that changes in feeding behavior often signal developing health problems. The reflection patterns created by your eye pouches have become so complex that they generate their own weather systems of light and shadow within your limited visual field. Sunlight streaming through the tank creates prismatic effects that would be beautiful if they weren't so disorienting. You've learned to close your eyes during certain times of day when the optical chaos becomes too overwhelming to process. Your memory remains sharp despite your physical decline, perhaps because it's become your primary survival tool. You can still navigate your carefully mapped pathways, though the journey takes longer and requires more frequent rest stops. You remember the routines of your caretakers, the timing of feeding schedules, the subtle environmental changes that signal maintenance activities. Your mind remains clear even as your body struggles with increasingly complex challenges. The seasonal rhythms that once influenced your behavior subtly now pass completely unnoticed. Your world has contracted to the immediate challenges of each day, with no energy left over for responding to the larger cycles that govern normal fish behavior. Spring brings no urge to explore, summer no increase in activity, autumn no preparation for change. You exist in medical time rather than natural time. Your relationship with your caretakers has deepened into something resembling the bond between a chronic patient and dedicated medical team. They know your individual quirks and preferences, can read the subtle signs that indicate changes in your condition, and have adapted their own schedules to accommodate your increasing need for monitoring and care. You recognize their voices, their movements, even their emotional states, as they work to maintain your precarious existence. The physics of your daily existence have created challenges that compound with each passing month. Your eye pouches now interfere with basic activities like resting on the substrate without damaging the delicate membranes. Swimming requires so much advanced planning and energy that you avoid it except when absolutely necessary. Even breathing has become more labored as the weight of your enlarged head affects your ability to maintain proper position in the water column. Your immune system continues to deteriorate under the constant stress of fighting infections and processing medications. Each treatment cycle leaves you weaker, more vulnerable to the next health crisis. Your body's ability to heal from minor injuries has slowed dramatically, turning small problems into major medical emergencies that require intensive intervention to resolve. The breeding behaviors that activate in your tank mates during certain seasons trigger no response in your simplified nervous system. Your energy reserves are so completely devoted to basic survival that reproductive instincts never develop. Your body has essentially shut down all non-essential biological functions, focusing every available resource on the minimal processes needed to sustain life from hour to hour. Tank decorations require constant evaluation and modification as your needs change. Objects that once provided safe shelter now pose collision hazards for your enlarged frame. Surfaces that seemed smooth enough become potential puncture risks for your increasingly delicate eye pouches. Your caretakers continuously redesign your environment, removing hazards and adding protective features as your limitations evolve. Your coloration has continued to fade as your body diverts energy from cosmetic functions to essential survival processes. The vibrant patterns that might characterize a healthy specimen have dulled to muted tones that reflect the enormous physiological stress of maintaining life under such challenging conditions. You look exactly like what you are, a creature operating at the absolute limits of biological possibility. The constant vigilance required to protect your eye pouches has become so automatic that you perform these behaviors even while sleeping. Your body has learned to maintain protective positioning unconsciously, adjusting throughout the night to prevent damage to your most vulnerable features. It's exhausting even when you're at rest, but the alternative is catastrophic injury that could end your life instantly. Your world has become intensely personal, focused entirely on the immediate space your body occupies and the basic functions needed to maintain life within that space. The activities of other fish, changes in lighting, variations in water flow, all of these have become irrelevant background noise to an existence centered on breathing, positioning, and protecting your most fragile anatomical features from damage. The mirror effects in the tank glass continue to evolve as your eye pouches grow larger and more prominent. The optical illusions created by light, refracting through the massive, fluid-filled structures, have become so complex that they generate phantom images bearing no relationship to reality. You've essentially given up trying to see in any conventional sense, relying entirely on memory and non-visual senses for navigation. At 15 months old, you've entered what your caretakers recognize as the advanced stage of your condition. The infections come more frequently and resist treatment more stubbornly. Your appetite has become unreliable, your energy reserves depleted by the constant effort required to maintain basic biological functions. Every day you continue breathing represents a victory against increasingly difficult odds. Your caretakers have begun preparing for the possibility that your condition might become unsustainable. They've researched humane options for fish in terminal decline, consulted with veterinarians about quality of life indicators, and discussed the ethical considerations involved in maintaining life that requires such intensive medical intervention. These conversations happen quietly, but you sense the change in their emotional tone when they observe your daily struggles. The routine that has sustained you for over a year continues, but with modifications that acknowledge your declining capabilities. Feeding sessions take longer as you struggle with even the softest foods. Health monitoring has become more frequent and more invasive as your caretakers try to stay ahead of developing problems. Rest periods stretch longer as your energy levels drop and recovery times increase. Your survival has required the complete transformation of your tank into a specialized medical facility equipped with monitoring devices, treatment equipment, and emergency supplies that would be at home in a hospital intensive care unit. The cost of maintaining your existence has escalated far beyond what anyone initially anticipated, but your caretakers remain committed to providing whatever level of care your condition demands. The other fish in your tank have adapted completely to your presence, treating you as a permanent fixture rather than a fellow inhabitant. They swim around you, feed near you, rest beside you, but never interact with you in any meaningful way. You exist in their world without being part of it, sharing space without sharing experience. Your legacy has already been established as an example of the extremes humans will pursue in the name of aesthetic beauty. You represent both the pinnacle of selective breeding achievement and a cautionary tale about the biological costs of prioritizing appearance over function. Your existence challenges fundamental assumptions about what constitutes viable life and how far artificial intervention should extend. The journey that began with your emergence from an egg in darkness has led to this carefully orchestrated medical existence, where every breath is made possible by human intervention. You've become living proof that beauty and biological functionality don't always align, that the pursuit of aesthetic perfection can create creatures that require extraordinary measures simply to survive. Each day brings the same careful positioning, assisted feeding, health monitoring, and protective behaviors that have become as automatic as breathing. Your world has been reduced to its most essential elements, but it remains your world nonetheless. You continue to exist against biological odds that should have eliminated you long ago, sustained by dedication that borders on the miraculous. Your caretakers check on you more frequently now, noting subtle changes in your positioning, breathing patterns, and response to stimuli. They've learned to read the signs that indicate good days versus difficult ones, adjusting their care protocols accordingly. Your tank has become a laboratory for studying the limits of artificial life support applied to creatures that exist purely for human aesthetic pleasure. The water chemistry requirements have become so stringent that your tank operates under conditions more controlled than those maintained in pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities. Every aspect of your environment is monitored continuously, with backup systems and emergency protocols in place to prevent the kinds of fluctuations that could prove immediately fatal to your compromised biological systems. Your appetite continues to provide one of the few reliable indicators of your overall condition. When you show interest in food, your caretakers feel cautiously optimistic. When you refuse offerings or eat reluctantly, they prepare for potential health crises that might be developing. Food has become both medicine and diagnostic tool in your carefully managed existence. The physics of movement present daily challenges that require increasingly creative solutions. Your eye pouches now interfere with activities as basic as maintaining proper orientation in the water column. Your caretakers have installed additional support structures and modified water flow patterns to help you navigate your limited world with minimal risk of injury or exhaustion. Your immune system operates at the absolute minimum level required to prevent complete collapse. Each infection depletes your reserves further. Each treatment cycle leaves you more vulnerable to the next health crisis. Your body has essentially been fighting a losing battle against pathogens for months, sustained only by intensive medical intervention and environmental controls. The artificial nature of your existence has created a protective bubble that shields you from natural selection while making you completely dependent on technological life support. You persist in conditions that exist nowhere in nature, maintained by human dedication that transforms basic pet care into complex medical management, requiring specialized knowledge and expensive equipment. Your caretakers have documented your case extensively, creating records that might help future attempts to maintain similarly modified fish. Your existence has pushed the boundaries of what's possible in ornamental fish care, establishing new protocols for managing extreme genetic modifications that prioritize appearance over biological viability. The seasonal changes that once provided subtle variations to your routine now pass completely unnoticed in your medically focused existence. Your biological rhythms have synchronized with treatment schedules rather than natural cycles, operating according to medication timing and health monitoring protocols rather than the environmental cues that govern normal fish behavior. Your relationship with your caretakers has evolved into something approaching family bonds, built through months of intensive care and shared struggle against your declining condition. They've invested enormous emotional and financial resources in maintaining your existence, transforming what began as pet ownership into something resembling long-term medical care for a chronically ill family member. The constant effort required to maintain basic biological functions consumes all your available energy, leaving nothing for the activities that normally define fish life. You don't explore, play, or engage in social behaviors. Your existence has been pared down to the absolute minimum required to sustain consciousness and basic physiological processes. At 16 months old, you continue to defy statistical expectations for survival, though each day represents an increasingly difficult victory against biological reality. Your persistence has required the complete restructuring of normal aquarium management, creating care protocols that border on the experimental. You've become both patient and test subject in an ongoing study of how far artificial intervention can extend life beyond what genetics and evolution intended. Your caretakers maintain detailed logs of your condition, tracking every symptom, every treatment response, every subtle change that might indicate developing problems or improving stability. Your tank has become a research facility focused on a single, impossibly complex subject whose survival depends on constant monitoring and frequent adjustment of environmental and medical parameters. The mirror effects created by your eye pouches continue to generate optical phenomena that would fascinate physicists if they weren't so functionally debilitating. Light passing through the massive, fluid-filled structures creates interference patterns and refractive distortions that bear no relationship to your actual surroundings. You've learned to navigate by touch and memory in a world where conventional vision has become more hindrance than help. Your world has contracted to the immediate vicinity of your body, with awareness focused on the basic functions of breathing, positioning, and protecting your most vulnerable anatomical features from damage. The larger rhythms of tank life, the activities of other fish, the cycles of day and night. All of these have become background noise to an existence centered on moment-to-moment survival. The routine continues with minor modifications, but no fundamental improvements. Each day brings the same careful positioning, assisted feeding, intensive health monitoring, and protective behaviors that have sustained you through months of declining capability. It's life reduced to its most essential elements, but it remains life nonetheless, a testament to both biological resilience and human dedication to preserving beauty. Regardless of the cost in resources or suffering, your existence has become a meditation on the limits of biological possibility. At 17 months, you've outlived every prediction, every statistical model, every veterinary estimate of how long a creature with your modifications could reasonably survive. Your caretakers have stopped making long-term plans and started living day by day, celebrating each morning you're still breathing as a small miracle against impossible odds. The eye pouches that have stabilized at proportions that would be comical if they weren't so tragic. They're now larger than your entire body was when you hatched, two massive balloons that dominate your existence and dictate every movement. The fluid inside has taken on a slightly yellowish tinge despite constant treatment, a sign that your body is struggling to maintain the delicate chemistry needed to keep these structures functional. Your feeding routine has devolved into something resembling intensive care nutrition. You can barely manage the smallest food particles, and even those require careful positioning and patient waiting as your weakened jaw muscles struggle with the basic mechanics of swallowing. Your caretakers have started supplementing your diet with liquid nutrients administered directly into the water near your mouth, turning feeding into a medical procedure that takes hours to complete. Sleep has become impossible in any conventional sense. Your body no longer has the strength to maintain the careful positioning required to protect your eye pouches during rest periods. Instead, you drift in and out of consciousness throughout the day, catching moments of rest when your exhausted system simply can't continue. Your caretakers have installed additional support structures to prevent you from sinking to the bottom when these micro-sleep episodes occur. The infections now resist even the strongest medications available for ornamental fish. Your immune system has essentially surrendered, overwhelmed by months of fighting battles it was never equipped to win. Each new outbreak spreads faster and causes more damage than the last, leaving permanent cloudiness and scarring in the delicate tissues of your eye pouches. Your caretakers spend most of their time monitoring your vital signs, such as they are in a fish. Your breathing has become labored and irregular, your movements reduced to the faintest adjustments of position. They've learned to read the subtle indicators that distinguish sleep from unconsciousness, rest from medical crisis. Their entire routine has reorganized around your declining needs. The tank has been stripped of all but the most essential equipment, creating an environment that resembles a hospital room more than an aquatic habitat. Every surface has been padded or removed to prevent injury from your increasingly uncontrolled movements. The filtration system runs constantly but quietly, maintaining water conditions that exist nowhere in nature but are necessary to prevent immediate collapse of your failing biological systems. Your world has contracted to the space immediately around your body, with awareness flickering in and out like a dying light bulb. The complex mental map you spent months constructing has become irrelevant as your mobility disappears. You exist now in a single spot, supported by artificial structures, sustained by medical intervention, maintained through pure human stubbornness in the face of biological reality. The other fish in your tank have been moved to different environments. Your medical needs require constant attention that's incompatible with normal aquarium life. You're alone now except for your caretakers, existing in splendid isolation as the sole occupant of what has become an aquatic intensive care unit designed for a population of 1. Your caretakers have begun the difficult conversations about quality of life and humane endpoints. They consult with veterinarians, research ethical guidelines for ornamental fish care, and struggle with questions that have no clear answers. How long should artificial intervention continue when natural biology has clearly reached its limits? What constitutes suffering in a creature whose capacity for pain remains scientifically uncertain? The daily routine has simplified to its most basic elements. Monitor breathing, check for signs of distress, administer medications, provide nutritional support, adjust environmental conditions, and wait. There are no more feeding frenzies to navigate, no social hierarchies to understand, no territorial disputes to avoid. Your existence has been reduced to the fundamental biological processes that separate life from death. Your reflection in the tank glass has become a distorted abstraction that bears no resemblance to the fish you once were. The massive eye pouches create optical effects that transform your image into something alien and otherworldly. Even your caretakers sometimes pause when they see your reflection, struck by how far you've traveled from anything resembling normal fish anatomy. The water chemistry requirements have reached levels that challenge the limits of available technology. Every parameter must be maintained within ranges so narrow that automated systems can't handle the precision required. Your caretakers adjust conditions manually throughout the day, making micro corrections that would seem obsessive if they weren't absolutely necessary for your survival. Your breathing has become the primary indicator of your condition, the one reliable sign that life continues despite all evidence to the contrary. When the rhythm is steady, your caretakers allow themselves cautious optimism. When it becomes irregular or labored, they prepare for another crisis that might finally exceed their ability to intervene successfully. The medications have been reduced to the absolute minimum required to prevent complete system collapse. Your body can no longer process complex treatments, and many substances that once helped now cause more harm than benefit. Pain management has become the primary focus, though measuring pain in fish remains more art than science. Your caretakers maintain their vigil with dedication that borders on the religious. They've invested too much time, emotion, and resources to abandon you now, even though every rational analysis suggests that your suffering outweighs any possible benefit from continued intervention. You've become their impossible project, their defiance of biological reality, their proof that determination can extend life beyond what nature intended. The tank lighting has been dimmed to reduce stress on your compromised nervous system. Your world exists in perpetual twilight now, a soft, underwater landscape designed to minimize stimulation that your failing body can no longer process effectively. Even gentle illumination seems to exhaust you, though your caretakers aren't sure if you can still see enough for light to matter. Your legacy has already been established through the detailed records your caretakers have maintained throughout your decline. Future attempts to care for similarly modified fish will benefit from their hard-won knowledge about the progression of complications, the effectiveness of various treatments, and the practical limits of artificial life support for creatures whose genetics prioritize appearance over survival. The seasonal changes that once influenced your behavior subtly now pass completely unnoticed in your medically focused existence. Spring arrives without triggering any response. Summer brings no increase in activity. Autumn creates no preparation for change. You exist outside natural time, sustained by artificial schedules that revolve around medication timing and monitoring protocols. Your appetite has virtually disappeared, though your caretakers continue offering food in case some primitive instinct might still respond to familiar stimuli. The liquid nutrients administered directly into your environment provide the minimal calories needed to fuel basic cellular processes, but even this simplified nutrition strains your compromised digestive system. The physics of your existence have become irrelevant as movement disappears from your repertoire of possible behaviors. The eye pouches that once made swimming difficult now simply hang motionless, their weight supported by carefully positioned structures that prevent them from tearing under their own mass. You've achieved perfect stillness, though not by choice. Your immune system operates at levels so low that they barely register on available testing methods. Every breath you take occurs in an environment sterilized to hospital standards, protected from pathogens that would prove immediately fatal to your defenseless biology. You survive in a bubble of artificial cleanliness that exists nowhere in the natural world. The artificial nature of your existence has created conditions so far removed from normal fish experience that you've become something entirely new, a hybrid of biological life and medical technology, sustained by human intervention at every level. You represent the absolute extreme of what's possible when aesthetic goals completely override evolutionary wisdom. Your caretakers have learned to find meaning in the smallest signs of stability. A steady breathing pattern maintained for several hours, a slight response to gentle stimulation, the absence of new complications for a few days. These minor victories provide the motivation needed to continue care that has become more challenging with each passing week. The water temperature requires constant manual adjustment as your sensitivity to environmental changes reaches levels that challenge measurement. Variations of less than half a degree can trigger cascading physiological problems that take days to stabilize. Your caretakers monitor conditions obsessively, making corrections that would seem paranoid if they weren't absolutely essential. Your digestive system has essentially shut down, processing only the minimal nutrients needed to fuel basic cellular metabolism. The complex biological processes that once supported growth, healing, and normal activity have been abandoned in favor of simple survival. Your body has made the ultimate triage decision, sacrificing everything non-essential to maintain consciousness for another day. The breeding behaviors that once affected your tank mates during certain seasons trigger no response in your simplified nervous system. Your energy reserves are so completely devoted to basic survival that reproductive instincts never developed. Your body shut down all non-essential functions months ago, focusing every available resource on the minimal processes needed to sustain life. At 18 months old, you've entered what your caretakers recognize as the final phase of your impossible journey. The infections resist all available treatments. Your appetite has disappeared completely, and your breathing has become so labored that each breath seems like it might be your last. Every day you continue existing pushes the boundaries of what medical intervention can achieve. Your caretakers have begun preparing for the inevitable conclusion of your story. They've researched humane methods for ending fish suffering, consulted with veterinarians about recognizing the point where intervention becomes cruelty, and made peace with the reality that their dedication can't indefinitely postpone biological limits. The routine has simplified to its absolute essence: monitor vital signs, provide comfort, prevent additional suffering, and wait. There are no more treatments to try, no more environmental adjustments to make, No more hope that your condition might somehow stabilize or improve. Your care has become purely palliative, focused on dignity rather than cure. Your world has contracted to the immediate space around your consciousness, whatever remains of it. The complex tank environment your caretakers created has become irrelevant as your awareness fades in and out like a dying signal. You exist now in moments rather than days, consciousness flickering between presence and absence. The mirror effects in the tank glass continue to create optical phenomena that would fascinate researchers if anyone were still interested in such things. Your eye pouches generate interference patterns and refractive distortions that transform light into abstract art. Though you're no longer capable of perceiving these effects, beauty persists even as the observer fades. Your caretakers maintain their vigil with the dedication of people who've invested too much to quit, even though every rational analysis suggests that continuation serves no purpose except their own inability to accept defeat. They've transformed pet ownership into medical mission, routine care into heroic intervention, simple affection into something approaching obsession. The water chemistry remains perfectly balanced despite your body's inability to benefit from such precision. Your caretakers continue their obsessive monitoring and adjustment, not because it helps you anymore, but because stopping would feel like abandonment. The rituals of care provide structure in a situation that has moved beyond rational management. Your breathing becomes increasingly irregular, with longer pauses between efforts that leave your caretakers wondering if each pause might be permanent. They've learned to read the subtle signs that distinguish sleep from unconsciousness, rest from the beginning of the end. Their entire attention focuses on the gentle movement of your gills. The tank lighting has been reduced to the absolute minimum needed for your caretakers to observe your condition. Your world exists in near darkness now, a twilight environment designed to minimize stress on systems that can barely function under the best conditions. Even gentle illumination seems to exhaust whatever remains of your nervous system's capacity to process stimulation. Your legacy is already secure in the detailed documentation your caretakers have maintained throughout your decline. Future researchers studying the limits of artificial life support for genetically modified organisms will have a complete record of what's possible when human determination meets biological impossibility. Your existence has pushed the boundaries of aquaculture into uncharted territory. The medications have been discontinued except for those that might provide comfort during your final period. Your body can no longer process complex treatments, and most interventions now cause more distress than benefit. Your caretakers have shifted from aggressive treatment to gentle support, acknowledging that their role has changed from healers to witnesses. Your caretakers speak quietly when they approach your tank, their voices subdued by the gravity of watching a creature approach the limits of what medical intervention can achieve. They've learned to find peace in small mercies, moments when your breathing seems less labored, periods when you appear comfortable, the simple fact that you've survived longer than anyone thought possible. The tank has become a shrine to human dedication and biological impossibility, a carefully controlled environment where art and science intersect at the expense of natural wisdom. You persist in conditions that exist nowhere else, maintained by technology and determination that transform basic pet care into something approaching medical miracle. Your existence continues to challenge fundamental assumptions about life, death, and the ethics of intervention. How far should artificial support extend when natural biology has clearly reached its limits? What constitutes kindness when continuation requires extraordinary measures? These questions have no easy answers, but your story provides data points for future consideration. The daily routine has become a meditation on the nature of caring itself. Your caretakers continue their ministrations not because they expect improvement, but because abandoning you would feel like betraying the commitment they made when they first decided to keep you alive despite the odds. Their dedication has become its own justification. Your world has been reduced to the most basic elements of existence: breathing, consciousness, the simple persistence of biological processes that separate life from death. Everything else has been stripped away, leaving only the essential spark that defines living matter. You've become existence in its purest form, maintained by artificial means, but still undeniably alive. At 19 months old, you represent both triumph and tragedy. Triumph of human dedication over biological reality, tragedy of aesthetic goals pursued without regard for functional consequences. Your story will end soon, but it will remain as testament to the complex relationship between beauty, suffering, and the lengths humans will go to preserve what they find appealing. Your caretakers have learned to measure time in breaths rather than days, finding meaning in the simple rhythm that confirms your continued existence. Each gentle movement of your gills represents another small victory against impossible odds, another moment of life sustained through pure human determination to preserve something beautiful but ultimately unsustainable. The routine continues with modifications that acknowledge your approaching end. Monitoring becomes more frequent and more gentle, medications focus purely on comfort, and environmental adjustments aim to minimize stress rather than promote improvement. Your care has evolved from medical treatment to compassionate witness of life's final stages. Your breathing grows shallower and more irregular with each passing day, the pauses between efforts growing longer as your exhausted system struggles to maintain the basic processes of life. Your caretakers count each breath as a gift, knowing that everyone brings you closer to the inevitable conclusion of your impossible journey. The tank remains perfectly maintained despite your inability to benefit from such care. Your caretakers continue their obsessive attention to water quality, temperature control, and environmental stability, not because it helps you anymore, but because stopping would feel like giving up. The rituals of care provide structure and meaning when medical intervention has reached its limits. Your existence has become a profound meditation on the nature of life itself, what it means to be alive, how long artificial intervention should continue, and whether persistence in the face of suffering constitutes kindness or cruelty. These questions will outlive you, but your story provides a unique perspective on the ethics of extreme intervention. The mirror effects in the tank glass continue generating optical phenomena that transform light into abstract art, though you're no longer capable of perceiving these beautiful distortions. Your eye pouches, the features that defined your existence and limited your life, persist in creating beauty even as their biological function fades toward extinction. Your caretakers have found peace in accepting that their role has evolved from healers to witnesses, from medical providers to compassionate companions during your final journey. They've learned to measure success not in improvement, but in dignity, not in cure, but in comfort, during the transition from life to whatever comes after. The water remains crystal clear, the temperature perfectly stable, the chemistry balanced to hospital standards. Your environment continues to meet every possible standard for aquatic care, though you're no longer capable of benefiting from such precision. The perfection of your surroundings stands in stark contrast to the deterioration of the life they were designed to support. Your breathing becomes so faint that your caretakers must watch closely to detect the subtle movements that confirm your continued existence. Each breath requires enormous effort from systems that have been operating beyond their design limits for months. The simple act of respiration has become a heroic achievement, repeated thousands of times each day. At 20 months old, you've survived longer than any creature with your modifications should reasonably exist. Your persistence has required the complete reconstruction of normal aquarium management, creating care protocols that border on the experimental. Every day you continue breathing represents a victory against biological odds that should have eliminated you long ago. Your caretakers speak in whispers now when they approach your tank, their voices subdued by the profound responsibility of witnessing a creature approach the absolute limits of what artificial intervention can achieve. They've become philosophers as much as caregivers, grappling with questions about life, death, and the ethics of extreme medical support. The tank lighting has been reduced to the absolute minimum needed for observation, creating an environment of perpetual twilight that seems appropriate for a creature transitioning between life and death. Even gentle illumination appears to exhaust whatever remains of your nervous system's capacity to process external stimulation. Your legacy extends far beyond your individual existence. The detailed records your caretakers have maintained throughout your decline will inform future attempts to care for genetically modified fish, providing crucial data about the progression of complications and the practical limits of artificial life support for creatures whose genetics prioritize appearance over survival. The routine has become a ritual of devotion rather than medical treatment. Your caretakers continue their careful monitoring and gentle adjustments not because they expect improvement, but because abandoning you would betray the commitment they made to preserve your life regardless of the cost in resources, time, or emotional energy. Your existence challenges every assumption about what constitutes viable life, pushing the boundaries between natural biology and artificial intervention to their absolute limits. You persist in a state that hovers between survival and medical support, maintained through technology and dedication that transforms basic pet care into something approaching miracle. The seasonal changes that once provided subtle rhythm to your existence now pass completely unnoticed in your medically focused reality. Your biological rhythms have synchronized entirely with treatment schedules rather than natural cycles, operating according to human-imposed timing rather than the environmental cues that govern normal fish behavior. Your caretakers have learned to find profound meaning in the smallest indicators of stability, a breathing pattern maintained for several hours, the absence of new complications for a few days, any sign that your suffering might be minimized, even if improvement remains impossible. These minor victories provide the motivation needed to continue care that has become more spiritual than medical. Your world has contracted to the immediate space around your consciousness, whatever remains of it after months of decline. The complex tank environment, created specifically for your needs, has become irrelevant as your awareness fades in and out like a signal from a distant star. You exist now in moments rather than continuous experience. The physics of your movement have become entirely irrelevant as mobility disappears completely from your repertoire of possible behaviors. Your eye pouches hang motionless, their weight supported by structures that prevent them from tearing under their own mass. You've achieved perfect stillness, though not by choice, existing as a living sculpture sustained by artificial means. Your immune system operates at levels so minimal they barely register on available testing methods. Every breath occurs in an environment sterilized to standards that exceed those maintained in human hospitals, protected from pathogens that would prove immediately fatal to your defenseless biology. You survive in a bubble of artificial cleanliness that exists nowhere in nature. The water chemistry requires constant manual adjustment as your sensitivity to environmental changes reaches levels that challenge the limits of measurement technology. Variations smaller than most instruments can trigger physiological responses that your caretakers have learned to recognize and prevent through obsessive monitoring and correction. Your digestive system has completely shut down, no longer capable of processing even the liquid nutrients that sustained you for months. Your body has made the ultimate triage decision, abandoning all non-essential functions to focus whatever energy remains on the basic cellular processes that separate life from death. You exist now on reserves that diminish with each passing hour. The breeding behaviors that affect other fish during seasonal changes trigger no response in your simplified nervous system. Your energy reserves are so completely devoted to basic survival that reproductive instincts never developed. Your body abandoned all thoughts of future generations months ago, focusing every available resource on extending the present moment. Your caretakers have begun the difficult process of accepting that their extraordinary efforts have reached their natural conclusion. They've consulted with veterinarians, researched humane endpoints, and made peace with the reality that their dedication, however profound, cannot indefinitely postpone the biological limits that govern all living things. At 21 months old, you exist at the absolute boundary between life and death, sustained by artificial means in conditions that challenge every understanding of what constitutes viable existence. Your breathing has become so faint that detection requires careful observation, each effort a monumental achievement by systems operating far beyond their design specifications. Your caretakers maintain their vigil with the dedication of people who've invested too much to quit, even though continuation serves no purpose except their own inability to accept biological reality. They've transformed routine pet care into something approaching religious devotion, finding meaning in the simple act of witness during your final transition. The tank remains perfectly maintained despite your inability to benefit from such precision. Water quality, temperature control, and chemical balance continue at hospital standards not because they help you anymore, but because maintaining these standards provides structure and purpose when medical intervention has reached its absolute limits. Your existence has become a profound meditation on the relationship between beauty and suffering, aesthetic achievement and biological function, human desire and natural law. You represent the absolute extreme of what's possible when artistic goals completely override evolutionary wisdom, creating life that requires extraordinary intervention simply to persist. The mirror effects generated by your eye pouches continue creating optical phenomena that transform ordinary light into abstract beauty, though you're no longer capable of perceiving these effects. Your most distinctive features persist in generating visual magic, even as their biological function fades toward extinction, creating art from the very structures that defined and limited your existence. Your caretakers speak in whispers when they approach, their voices subdued by the gravity of witnessing a creature approach the final boundaries of what artificial life support can achieve. They've learned to measure success in comfort rather than cure, dignity rather than improvement, peaceful transition rather than indefinite extension of suffering. The routine has simplified to its absolute essence: monitor the faintest signs of life, provide whatever comfort remains possible, prevent additional suffering, and maintain the vigil that has become its own justification. There are no more treatments to attempt, no more adjustments to make, no more hope for anything except peaceful conclusion. Your breathing grows so shallow and irregular that your caretakers must watch with intense concentration to detect the subtle movements that confirm your continued existence. Each breath requires enormous effort from systems that have been operating beyond their design limits for many months, making every respiration a heroic achievement, repeated with decreasing frequency. Your world has contracted to whatever remains of consciousness, flickering like a candle flame in wind. The carefully controlled environment that sustained you for months has become irrelevant as awareness fades toward extinction. You exist now in the space between presence and absence, sustained by artificial means, but approaching natural conclusion. The water remains crystal clear, perfectly heated, chemically balanced to standards that exist nowhere in nature. Your caretakers continue their obsessive attention to environmental details, not because such precision benefits you anymore, but because stopping would feel like abandonment of the commitment that has defined their relationship with your impossible existence. Your legacy is secure in the detailed documentation that will inform future understanding of the limits of artificial intervention for genetically modified organisms. Your story represents a unique data point in the intersection of aesthetics and ethics, beauty and biology, human determination, and natural law. Future attempts to maintain similarly compromised creatures will benefit from the hard-won knowledge your caretakers have accumulated. The tank lighting has been reduced to the absolute minimum needed for observation, creating an environment of gentle twilight that seems appropriate for a creature transitioning from life toward whatever comes after. Even minimal illumination appears to stress whatever remains of your nervous system's capacity to process external stimulation. Your caretakers have found unexpected peace in accepting their role as witnesses rather than healers, companions rather than medical providers. They've learned that sometimes the greatest kindness involves accepting limits rather than fighting them, providing comfort rather than seeking cure, honoring dignity rather than pursuing impossible extension of suffering. The seasonal rhythms that once influenced your behavior in subtle ways now pass completely unnoticed in your medically focused existence. You operate outside natural time, sustained by artificial schedules that revolve around monitoring protocols rather than the environmental cues that have governed fish behavior for millions of years. Your existence challenges fundamental assumptions about life, death, and the ethics of intervention, providing unique insights into questions that have no easy answers. How long should artificial support continue when natural biology has clearly reached its limits? What constitutes compassion when continuation requires extraordinary measures? Your story contributes data to discussions that will continue long after your individual journey concludes. At 22 months old, you represent both the ultimate achievement and the final failure of human efforts to maintain life beyond its natural boundaries. Your persistence has required the complete reconstruction of normal aquarium management, creating care protocols that push the limits of what's possible with current technology and unlimited dedication. Your breathing becomes so faint and irregular that your caretakers count each effort as a gift, knowing that every breath brings you closer to the inevitable conclusion of your impossible journey. The simple act of respiration has become a monumental achievement, repeated with decreasing frequency as your exhausted systems approach their final limits. The routine continues with modifications that acknowledge your approaching end while maintaining the dignity that has characterized your care throughout this extraordinary ordeal. Monitoring becomes more frequent, but gentler. Environmental controls remain precise, but focused on comfort rather than treatment. And the vigil continues not because improvement is possible, but because abandonment would betray the commitment that has sustained both you and your caretakers. Your tank remains a testament to human dedication and technological capability, a carefully controlled environment where every parameter is maintained at levels that would impress research facilities. This precision continues not because it benefits you anymore, but because maintaining these standards provides meaning and structure when medical intervention has exhausted its possibilities. Your existence has become a profound exploration of what it means to be alive, how long artificial intervention should continue, and whether persistence in the face of inevitable suffering constitutes kindness or prolonged cruelty. These questions will outlive your individual story, but your experience provides unique perspective on the ethics of extreme medical support. Your caretakers have learned to find deep satisfaction in simply bearing witness to your final journey, providing whatever comfort remains possible while accepting that their role has evolved from medical treatment to compassionate presence. They understand now that sometimes the greatest achievement lies not in preventing death, but in ensuring dignity during the transition from life to whatever follows. The water chemistry remains perfectly balanced, despite your inability to derive any benefit from such precision. Temperature control continues at hospital standards, filtration operates flawlessly, and every environmental parameter stays within ranges that exist nowhere in nature, but were created specifically to support your impossible existence. Your breathing grows so shallow that detection requires complete attention from your caretakers, who have learned to read the subtlest movements that confirm life persists despite all evidence suggesting it shouldn't. Each gentle flutter of your gills represents another moment stolen from biological inevitability, another second of existence maintained through pure human determination to preserve something beautiful but ultimately unsustainable. The mirror effects in the tank glass continue generating optical phenomena that would fascinate researchers if anyone still had energy for such observations. Your eye pouches, now motionless but still massive, create interference patterns that transform ordinary light into extraordinary visual displays. Beauty persists even as the observer fades toward extinction. Your caretakers speak in hushed tones when discussing your condition, their voices carrying the weight of people who understand they're witnessing something unprecedented in aquaculture. They've pushed the boundaries of what's possible with artificial life support, creating protocols that will inform future attempts to maintain similarly compromised organisms. The tank has become a shrine to the intersection of science and compassion, technology and dedication. Every piece of equipment operates flawlessly to maintain conditions that support life at its most tenuous, while your caretakers provide the human element that transforms mechanical precision into something approaching love. Your existence represents the absolute extreme of what's achievable when aesthetic goals override evolutionary wisdom. You persist in a state that challenges every understanding of viable life, maintained through artificial means that didn't exist when your species first developed the genetic modifications that created your distinctive appearance. The routine has achieved a rhythm that resembles meditation more than medical care. Your caretakers monitor your condition with the focused attention of people who've learned to find profound meaning in the smallest signs of stability, the briefest moments when suffering seems minimized, even if improvement remains impossible. Your legacy extends far beyond your individual story. The detailed records maintained throughout your decline will contribute to scientific understanding of genetic modification limits, artificial life support capabilities, and the ethical considerations involved in maintaining creatures whose existence requires extraordinary intervention. At 23 months old, you exist at the very edge of what biological systems can endure with artificial support. Your breathing has become so faint that your caretakers must concentrate completely to detect the tiny movements that distinguish life from death. Each breath is a victory against odds that grow more impossible with every passing hour. Your caretakers have found unexpected peace in their role as witnesses to your final journey. They've learned that sometimes the greatest kindness involves accepting natural limits rather than fighting them indefinitely, providing comfort and dignity rather than pursuing impossible cures through increasingly invasive intervention. The water remains pristine despite your inability to benefit from such purity. Chemical balance, temperature control, and filtration continue at standards that would impress research facilities, maintained not because they help you anymore, but because stopping would feel like betraying the commitment that has defined this entire extraordinary effort. Your world has contracted to whatever flickers of consciousness remain after months of systematic shutdown. The complex environment created specifically for your needs has become irrelevant as awareness fades toward extinction. You exist now in moments rather than continuous experience, presence punctuated by absence. The seasonal changes that once provided subtle rhythm to your existence pass completely unnoticed in your medically focused reality. You operate outside natural time, sustained by artificial schedules that have replaced the environmental cues governing normal fish behavior with human-imposed monitoring protocols. Your immune system has essentially ceased functioning, operating at levels so minimal they barely register on available testing methods. You survive in an environment sterilized beyond hospital standards, protected from pathogens that would prove instantly fatal to your completely defenseless biology. The physics of existence have become irrelevant as all movement disappears from your behavioral repertoire. Your eye pouches hang motionless, their massive weight supported by structures preventing them from tearing under their own mass. You've achieved perfect stillness, existing as living sculpture maintained through technological intervention. Your digestive system shut down completely weeks ago, no longer capable of processing even the liquid nutrients that sustained you during better periods. Your body operates on reserves that diminish steadily, having abandoned all non-essential functions to focus whatever energy remains on the basic cellular processes separating life from death. The breeding behaviors affecting other fish during seasonal cycles trigger no response in your simplified nervous system. Your energy reserves are so completely devoted to basic survival that reproductive instincts never developed. Your biology abandoned thoughts of future generations long ago, concentrating every available resource on extending the present moment. Your caretakers have begun preparing for the inevitable conclusion of your story while maintaining the vigil that has become its own justification. They've researched humane methods, consulted with specialists, and made peace with the reality that their dedication, however profound, cannot indefinitely postpone biological limits. The tank lighting exists at the absolute minimum needed for observation, creating perpetual twilight that seems appropriate for a creature transitioning between life and whatever follows. Even gentle illumination appears to stress whatever remains of you, and here you can find the next video. Until then, see you soon.